السلام عليكم وأهلا وسهلا يا جماعة. I take it we are live. I just firing up. I could see that. Right. Just right. Those of you that are just tuning in, click live and share. I'm just firing this up on the other platform as well. Right. Bismillah. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. Wassalatu wassalam على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا. I see some of the regular pleasant faces to see online. Allah bless you all. Right, so tonight we've got an epic treat for you all on this week's MindTrap. We'll be going through a journey, inshallah, of a conversation ranging on discussions from activism to Islamic leadership to consciousness to psychedelics to AI and the future and what it holds. And an esteemed guest I have for you tonight, hailing from the UK, born and raised in Leicester, Dr. Bilal Hassam, who led a life of Islamic activism here. He is a professional, a qualified doctor, practitioner, GP, who's traveled the world, met with many dignitaries. He currently resides in South Africa. He has a profound research in the world of tech and AI. In addition to his dabbling with in writing, so with all of that in mind, I bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, right, Dr. Bilal Hassam, marhaban bik wa shukran. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you, Mufti Saab?
Lillahi alhamd, lillahi alhamd. I'm just, as I've just fired up your, the volume just seemed slightly low all of a sudden on your end. I mean, it was perfectly fine a moment ago. So I take it nothing's changed here.
I hope not. Can you hear me now, loud and clear?
I can hear you. It's slightly low. Check if there's if you go into your settings. Till then, I'll just have a look. It allows you to adjust manually as well if you go into your settings. Right. So till Doc is just brushing up on that. So yeah, I just want to say to the rest of you, if you could just like and share and spread the love. Allah bless you all. And right, yeah. We've got, I believe, back Doc. All right. Was there any luck in that?
Yeah. Can you
Yeah,
hear me now? Is that better?
I can hear you, but if
Go
I
even
take it
louder.
doesn't. Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Is that better?
if it
Is
does
that
allow
better?
you to go, if it allows you
That's the
to, usually if
loudest.
you go, is that the loudest? Okay.
That's the
Sure.
loudest, yeah.
Okay. Right. Shukran. Is that? I take it it's okay for people tuning in. If you could just, we've got Clear, Ma'ab, a few other people. If you could just give a Mariam. All right. So any feedback, it's okay. Right. Shukran. I appreciate it. Hard one. Right. So, Doc, shukran for joining us. And right, jumping a bit into your journey, somebody born and raised in the UK, you got into the Islamic scene. Take us through a bit of your journey just to understand, where we are today and then your thoughts on these fascinating topics, which I'm so fond of. But before we get to that, yeah, guide us, navigate through a bit of your some of the chapters of your life briefly for us, if you will.
Yeah, so Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and thank you so much for having me, Mufti. So born and raised in Leicester. My dad was actually born in Malawi. My mom was born in South Africa, in Durban. But dad came to the UK when he was like 4 or 5 years old, and very much grew up in Leicester. And my mom, only when she got married, came to the UK. But growing up, as you probably experienced, most, I think 60, 70% of Muslims in Britain are either Bangladeshi, Pakistani, or Indian. And when people used to ask, where are you from? I'd often say South Africa. And I always felt this connection. That's the place where we went for holidays, and all my mom's family were always in South Africa. And I think that sort of
Hmm.
always made me sort of feel like I was a bit different to the people that I grew up against. And alhamdulillah, I was bright at school, got into medical school, studied, graduated. But it was all in that sort of post 9/11, post 7/7 era. And so I really sort of came into my Islam under that umbrella, under that guise, and got very involved with campus activism and in the Islamic societies on campus, and did a lot of interfaith work and da'wah stuff and Muslim student stuff. Um, and one of my big roles was actually being the designated driver for scholars and speakers. So I spent, when I should be studying, I was driving around all these sheikhs and imams and whatnot all across the country, and I got to spend a lot of time with different teachers, and I would grill them, whilst they sat next to me in my little VW Polo. I'd be giving them a really all these difficult questions, and then you could sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. You get to see who's actually got something to say. Um, and I was fortunate to get invited onto a very, very fancy fellowship program. I took a break from medical school. It was sort of attached to the UN and all sorts of other stuff, and I got to travel around the world. And it really opened my eyes to professional community organizing and
Mm.
professional civic society. And if you look at the Muslim community, a lot of the issues that we have can be put down to, in the Western sense, can be put down to the lack of infrastructure. Jewish community has been around in decent numbers for over 100 years. And,
Yeah.
obviously the Christian community being the established religion, there's these deep institutions, or we're relatively new and we haven't built that sort of Muslim civic society. And, alhamdulillah, all the stuff that I'm involved in now, you get to see a lot of those things are changing, and there's a huge industry that's developing, and it's really sort of an exciting time. So as I graduated, I carried on all my Muslim activism stuff, and I got involved with lots of different fancy programs. And it sort of came to realize that I was working as a doctor in West London only
Mm.
really to fund my, at night. One of the teachers, our teachers would say, be a monk in the day or so be a
Mm.
knight in the day and a monk at night, meaning
Mhm.
so as I was working as a doctor, I would spend a lot of my salary and my time just building, organizing, arranging programs and events, and then that sort of spilled out into me doing less and less medicine. I started locuming, working essentially as a freelancer doctor, and organizing more programs, and eventually was able to find and took initially taking quite a significant pay cut to work full time in Muslim spaces, Muslim media, Muslim charity sector, um, and I'm someone who's pretty well connected and networked, and I spend a lot of my work as was connecting dots, but also just developing this sort of authentic British Muslim identity and trying to understand what is that. And I was very interested, and I'm still very interested in the intersection of Islam and culture. And I'm sure you're familiar with the famous paper that Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah wrote many, many years ago now, Islam and the Cultural Imperative. And it was a really sort of important framing statement for me. And he opens with this really beautiful analogy where he says, Islam is like a crystal clear flowing river whose waters are sweet and pure and life-giving, but it has no color of its own, and instead it takes on the color of the bedrock it flows above. So in Mali, Islam looks African, and in
Yeah.
China, Islam looks Chinese. And ultimately, Islam is not concerned with form as much as it's concerned with principles, ethics, and values that then take on different cultural manifestations. And that's the genius of our jurisprudential tradition, is that Islam was always dynamic wherever it went. It was able to engage local custom and culture and become indigenized. And so I felt
Yeah.
very much I've been at the vanguard, or trying to be at the vanguard, of what does that indigenization process look like? How do we articulate an expression of Islam that's true to the timeless values of our tradition, but it's also relevant, engaging, dynamic to the issues and the challenges and the context that we find ourselves in today. And that's really been the question of my life's work. And I'm very blessed that, alhamdulillah, being able to, make a career out of it, as it were. And now with the Muslim agency, that's really the intersection that I'm working at for Muslim organizations, for people engaging Muslim communities, Muslim leaders, politicians, celebrities, artists, non-Muslims or governments and big foundations when they want to understand Muslims. Um,
Yeah.
it's sort of getting into the minutia and the nuance of what does Islam in the 21st century look like, smell like, taste like. And one of the examples I'll end with this is you must have been to Topkapi Palace, right? Um,
I
you,
haven't yet, but inshallah soon. Soon.
Astaghfirullah, Mufti Sahib.
I know it's
So
Toba,
Top
Tobatan
Topkapi,
Nasuha.
it is. Topkapi has one of the original first sort of compilations of the Quranic text, and
Mm,
allegedly the same text that Uthman radiallahu anh was reading when he was stabbed, and his blood is on the pages and it's open for you to see. And when you look at that
mm,
text, as you see with these early Qurans, it's just very basic Arabic, right? There's no harakah, there's no numbers, there's nothing. It's just the very basic Arabic script. And then you just look up, and then you see all this crazy, elaborate Ottoman calligraphy. And then I ask the
yeah.
question, how did you get from that to that? And the Quran is the most sacred, precious thing in our religion. But can you imagine the audacity that these Ottomans had to take the most sacred part of our tradition, and they're gonna like twist it and put some curves and bends and do all this funky stuff with it, and produce something that's so beautiful that a non-Muslim is tattooing it on their bodies. Imagine how comfortable they had to be with the religion and the most sacred parts of our religion, and how comfortable they were with themselves and their identity and their culture, that they could bring those two together. And that really, I feel, is a challenge of our age, is like, how do we bring the tradition authentically from a center ground, from like an orthodox position? We're not trying to be liberal, progressive, new age, but like the center tradition, Orthodox Islam for me is big tent, all inclusive, all encompassing, dynamic, engaging. And that's the genius of Islam that we had, that built all this Islamic civilization. And inshallah, it's the genius that we return to.
Yeah. I mean, this whole, you look at calligraphy, and calligraphy, it's kind of tied into the backdrop of Muslim art, Islamic art, the way masajid, the way these institutions had been decorated. Apart from just being unquestionably beautiful, which it is, and mesmerizing, it's very entrancing, hypnotic as well. Like, people who've looked at Islamic art have often spoken of things like fractal patterns, and how this kind of stuff, which only in the last century are we coming to understand mathematically, as in with theories and frameworks, although we subconsciously recognize these things. So Islamic art, the identity that Muslims had back then, the security, the feeling, kind of sure about yourself, about your deen, about your that you have the right, to to kind of tread these waters, to be creative in that way, to be expressive, not to be worried about somebody shutting you down, everybody being judging, this panopticon of everybody's telling each other. Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
that's what
calligraphy is
I
like,
yeah.
it cuts to the very heart of the deepest metaphysics and spiritual, like, dimensions of our faith. Like, it all begins with the nukta, with the dot. One scholar, he wrote a book. It's a really like a mind trap, and
Mhm.
he said one way of looking at the Quran. He said the Quran is four things. He said the first thing the Quran is silence, because the Quran emerges from silence and returns to silence. And without silence, we wouldn't understand the Quran. It would be a constant stream of noise. So he said the first thing the
Okay.
Quran is silence. And then the second thing is letters. And then the third thing is words. And the fourth thing is ayat, sentences. And so he says, the huruf, the etymology of the word letter in Arabic refers to the cutting edge of a blade. And so
Yeah.
he talks about how, like, the human being, like, we have the realm of form and the realm of meaning. So the
Yeah.
seen realm is the realm of form without meaning, and the unseen realm is the realm of meaning without form. So the
Yeah.
mulk and the malakut, and the human being is the barzakh, the interspace between the seen and the unseen, between the realm of form and the realm of meaning. And he says we are able to take meaning from the unseen and project it onto the form through language. And so, hence, the vocal cords, the vocal system is essentially the codex for deciphering all of knowledge. And so, huruf, it means the cutting edge of the blade. And so, what we do
Yeah.
with our words, with our letters and our words, is that we cut through and we distinguish. So, when you cut
Yeah.
something, you separate it out. So, and kalam, the word for words in Arabic, means to cut
Yeah.
through. So the
And
huruf
yeah.
is a cutting edge,
And in
and
essence,
then you cut
with the
through.
silence thing you were saying, that's what you're doing, isn't it? Like every word, it is a chop, that it is something that a sound must be intercepted with silence for it to express itself as a, as a morpheme, as a word. It couldn't be without, you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
just go non-stop without,
Exactly.
intercepted silences. Yeah,
So, and it's the same with when you think about calligraphy. It's first it's nothing, and then it starts with a dot. It doesn't matter how you cannot start anything but with a dot. And
mm,
if you must have had this famous tradition that said all of the knowledge of the Quran can be contained is contained in the Fatiha, and all of the knowledge of the
right.
Fatiha is contained in the Basmala, and all of the knowledge of the Basmala is in the Ba, and all of the knowledge of the Ba is in the Nukta, is in the dot. And so, like, you could meditate just on that presence and absence, the binary, on and off, black and white, the first, dot of creation. The Alif is, and they've done, they look at calligraphy as it's a huge science. Like the Alif
Mm.
is seven nuqtas, and it's directly proportional to the proportions of a human body. The head of the Alif is the size of your head.
I
Your head
I've
is
not
one
heard of
seventh.
that one. Is
No,
seven nuktas?
yeah.
Okay,
So
that's is that
there's a whole science to
corresponding
this.
to the kind of almost the chakras, almost.
Well,
You got the seven in the
the irony
ascending
is
order. Yeah.
that there's an irony. One of my friends, her name is Suraya Saeed. She's one of the most qualified calligraphers in the world. MashaAllah,
Okay.
incredible, talented,
Mhm.
London-based calligrapher. She studied with the masters in Turkey and so on. And I was just recently with her in Cape Town, and she was doing a small presentation about this. And you know, artists are often criticized, or we're told to be cautious about depicting the human form and the living form. But the irony is that the
Mm.
very letters of Arabic are based on the human form. The Alif is a standing person. The head of the Alif is based on the standing man. And all of the other letters are corresponding. The Ba is a curved Alif, the Mim is a curved Alif. All of the letters correspond to each other, and they have this direct relationship to the human form. So it's ironic that the very glyphs that we use in our art are based on the human form, and yet we're told, oh, be careful about expressing a face or eyes, or cover the face or whatever.
Yeah, because Ibn Arabi, he has a huge fascination with letters, and the profound, what he feels, mysteries hidden within each isolated letter.
mm,
I mean, it's very profound, and it's something which I was just listening to one lecture. I think it was by Dr. Eric Winkle, but it was just on Ibn Arabi and the wow. Not like the
mm.
wow as in wow, but the letter
But
wow.
wow.
And yeah, and so he has this which is I'm still trying to learn about, which is this profound uh, inner sight, very mystical about each of these letters. How you're saying that they are very,
Mm,
that they're not just, uh, just simple scratches on a surface. He feels that they
mm,
they are symbolic of deeper mysteries.
mm.
Mm.
No, each letter, exactly. Each letter has a secret, and each letter also has, um, beyond the esoteric stuff that, you know, letters in Arabic are associated with a certain schema of words. And I remember one of our
Mm.
teachers, he was saying, for example, the letter Ghain is always associated with something hidden or unseen, right? Or something
Okay.
that's
Mm.
shied away. So just think about you have ghaib,
Right.
ghiba. Think about
Mm.
any words with the
Oh
rain.
wow.
There's a
Okay, I
dimension
see what you're
of something
saying.
hidden, right? And
Okay,
then
غير, like غير,
ghaib,
the
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh wow.
you'll start
I
to see
never
all these
thought of that.
connections, and then you take. So then he
Mm.
said, take the letter ra. So in the letter ra often will correspond to something that's continuous. So just throw out
Okay, like
Arabic words with ra,
riwaya.
aywa,
Yeah, like riwaya. What about
and
rajul,
it corresponds to the
man?
to this to the sound as well. It's a
Rijl
constant sound, right?
as well, foot, as in
So so it
okay.
keeps going, right?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, ranna,
uh,
the sound of to
reverb
ring
vibrations, they
actually,
never end,
ranna. Yeah.
right? And
Mm.
then so then qaf corresponds to the cessation of something, or the closure, or the stopping.
Oh, like qif, as in to stop. Okay.
If what else have you got?
Qawl, qawl, like a statement. I suppose it's said and done, as in
Completed.
like that.
So then
Right.
he said, put those letters together. Gharaka. What do you get in Arabic? Ghurik.
To drown.
What's to drown? So he says,
To
explain it.
drown.
So what happens when you drown? First you go in the water, the rain. You, then you keep going, and then half you're finished. And it's very literal. It makes sense. And there's actually a lot you can decipher in the words based on the schema of letters. And there's a
Mm.
whole set study of this. Is a huge science. I mean, one of my friends, a teacher, a brilliant American scholar, Sheikh Hisham Mahmood. He's an expert linguist, and he dives deep into these etymologies.
Is
And
it, the
you
one
I think,
of Zaytuna?
yeah,
No,
formerly
or
Zaytuna. Yeah, formerly
right.
Zaytuna.
Yeah, I have
And
been in touch with him positively in
yeah,
the
that's
past.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He runs the Lantana initiative. It does a lot of teaching and stuff online and retreats and stuff. But yeah, there's so much of this knowledge that's right there, and uh, it all ties together. And I remember one of our teachers saying that, and this corresponds to the art. He said, if I can quote him, he said that Allah is the most real, and Allah is the absolutely real. And
Yeah.
as we approach Him, we become more real. And then internally, we become beautiful. And then everything we do becomes beautiful. And so a society that is close to God is by definition beautiful. And
Wow.
when you look at our society today, and all the ugliness that you see, it's a reflection of our absence away from and distance away from the divine. And so there's a connection between ethics and aesthetics. And even the word ihsan, from what I remember, the word ihsan isn't, we say, excellence, spiritual excellence. It corresponds to a visual, a visual excellence. Like a hasan is to be visually pleasing as well. So, um,
Yeah, I
all
really
these
like
things are
what you
intimately
just
tied
said
together.
about that. You see, because we are fundamentally mirrors of the divine. On earth, Allah's names, His attributes. We are mirroring the divine tajalli on earth, like, and we see Allah's tajalli in all his signs, because the signs of Allah are going to be either the cosmos, the horizon, or in us, or the scripture. But
Mm.
Allah says, "Wa fi anfusikum," in you, you will see his signs. So I suppose, as a mirror, the the closer proximally, between a proximal and distal reflection, the more you're getting closer to Allah, symbolically speaking here, that you are becoming more, more real in a way, and more beautiful, because that's what you're mirroring. Because the true wujud being is really Allah's being. Our being is
Mm.
but like an epiphenomenon, like an emergent property.
Mm-hmm.
So we do, we do exist, but our existence compared to Allah's existence is non-existence. Allah's existence is the real existence, and we are like this emergent property. So I really, yeah, I really liked that
And
what
you could
what
also
you said.
liken it to you know this idea, as you mentioned in your this psychology series recently, al-mu'min mir'at al-mu'min, and
Yeah.
or al-mu'min mir'at al-mu'min. And
Mm,
you know when we get in the way of that, when I say we, I mean our nafs, our ego, we block that reflection. And when we can understand what it means to lower the self, lower the ego, obliterate the ego, even what shines through is only then a fuller reflection of the divine.
yeah. Somebody just put a comment here, just to add, just to put that, the study of letters holds a long history amongst the Sufis, Hurufism, which was said to be founded by Fazlullah Astrabadi. Shukran for that, and I'll look into that as well. But yeah, okay. And
Mm.
this thing about the form you were saying, Doc, and because you've had a whole like almost a lifetime around people that have been very rooted in spirituality, in this whole kind of philosophical outlook as well. The form, this I find this so fascinating as a philosophical discussion, the form, because and then words, because words are a type of form, in a way. But I guess there's form in material, but words too are a kind of form without which they could not exist. And whether that's some punctuated silences and things like this that we're saying, but this is a divine, it's almost like the magic by which the lights in this world for us have switched on, that Allah saying that with this very kun, one could say, by words bringing into existence beingness, or us. And but then at the same time, the greatest experiences are
Hmm.
often ineffable, you can't capture in words.
Hmm.
So there's a bit of an, almost like a, I don't know whether it's oxymoronic, or it's a paradox, or whether it's a contradiction. I don't know. That words are this thing, that this kind of, this ability to capture within form, is what allamahul bayan. Allah has, it's the miracle, and it's the kind of animated nature of this dunya that we are in. Yet our peak experiences escape that simultaneously. So what are your thoughts on that? Because
Yeah. So
yeah,
in medical school, and I remember that you look at a child developing, you have these benchmarks and milestones. So you'll have like gross motor skills, fine motor skills, language and speech, and then I think there's another category I can't remember. And if you look at what a 2-year-old can do with words and basic grammar,
yeah,
if you were to correspond that to their fine motor skills, it's equivalent of, it's like them learning how to do brain surgery at 2 years old. That the amount of neurological development and complexity required to articulate as a 2-year-old is as complicated as your fine motor skills of a neurosurgeon. And I think it's been said before. I can't remember the Latin word, but
Really? Okay.
the
Wow.
humans are like the what's it, Homo speaking, whatever the Latin is. That
Homo
what
sapien.
differentiates us. No, no, but I'm
Oh,
saying like
right.
there was a play on that said what
Oh,
differentiates us. I think sapien refers to thought, right?
yes. It
Um,
refers to, yeah, the wise. Yeah.
so there was someone else who said, we're actually the speaking human, because that this is what
Yeah.
differentiates us from every other creature, is our ability to articulate as much as we can, and understand as much as we can. And even other animals that can communicate, it's light years apart. um
Yeah.
so my
Yeah.
initial thought when you were
Absolutely.
speaking was actually, um perhaps words are the interface that allows us to uh, engage the simulation, as it were. And
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about, this Rumi's analogy of the ant that's walking through. So Rumi talks in one of his
Sure.
stories about
If you
this
if you
ant
if you
that's,
go through it, yeah, for the viewers as well.
yeah. So Maulana Rumi talks about this ant who's uh, climbing through this carpet, and he's complaining to God that what are all these huge fibers or huge, tall things of different colors.
Ropes.
It makes no sense. My life is so difficult. He's complaining. And then, Allah says, if only you could see what I can see. And when you zoom out, you see this beautiful Persian rug. And I think when you look at any and every angle and dimension of reality, it's in perfect order and perfect beauty, from all these different perspectives. And the only perspective where it looks out of sync is our human sort of daily conscious experience. That this everything kind of looks a bit jungled up. As soon as you start to, if you were to take the most disgusting thing you can imagine, like a pile of dog feces, and you zoom in enough onto a microscopic level, you'll just see beauty.
Okay.
And if you were to look at it from a light spectrum perspective, you see beauty. And you see order and structure and patterns. So from every sort of angle, we have this verse in the Quran that everything is worshipping Allah, but you don't perceive how it's worshipping Allah. And everything, and this ties quite interesting to an AI conversation as well. But one way of looking at it is everything has programming. Everything has
Yeah.
programming, and that programming you could call fitra. And nothing can transcend its fitra. Everything is that you're baked. Once if your program's been written, then you can't transcend that programming, right? It's your
Yeah.
code, it's your
Mm.
fitra. And the only creation that can transcend its own code, as it were, is the human being. And the
Yeah.
very definition of what makes us human, and this is what Allah says, and there's verses and there's hadith about this, that had we not sinned, had human beings not sinned, Allah would have had removed you and replaced you with a creation that did sin and then repented. To be human is to sin, and if we were perfect, we wouldn't be
Yeah.
humans. We'd be angels. We'd be something else. So when you think about
Mm.
AI and consciousness,
I
that
see.
a computer program can only ever do what it's programmed to do. It can never transcend its programming. It's not going to, if it has consciousness, it's not going to feel sad unless it was programmed to feel sad. It's not going to take its own life unless it was programmed to do that, right? Whereas a human being can transcend our basic programming, and that's what defines us as a human being, you could say. But yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Okay.
jumping ahead
Wow.
perhaps.
No, 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 no. I love that. I love that. So, y- a bunch of things there that really are so fascinating. One, that everything having this programming, and a quick just a side note on that, just you've seen the photograph of that bacteria that that's got all these scientists and kind of molecular biologists and other people, engineers as well, all excited, where it's all on, online, about how at such a tiny level it's operating with what is equivalent to engineered kind of parts and motors, and it's running on something almost equivalent to how we would think of electric engines. So it's been quite widely circulated. But yeah, this thing of, look, consciousness. So through this, we, for us, for humans, the lights are switched on, so so to speak, that what makes us different is this gift of consciousness. Often, to me, I use the term consciousness synonymously with ruh, and that it is this thing that Allah has breathed into some of his creation, that has, it just switches the lights on, and through that we have this ability. We have, insan is, like you said, even language, which we touched upon. To me, language is always a miracle that it exists. It's nothing short of miraculous. It defies, to me, what would be the laws of nature almost. The fact that language exists, and the way it exists, it's incomprehensible. The fact that, we can, so the fact that we can, in just morphemes and in expressions, short bursts, express, stringing together just a series of sounds, express delicate, you know, complex concepts, that, and emotions. I can evoke emotions in the listener. And okay, maybe emotions, one could say, well, animals can make cries, and it can evoke certain emotionality. But the fact that I can convey and project these, such complexity with just words, and you can pick it up instantaneously as you hear it, and visualize and mentalize it, it is a miracle, because it doesn't
There's
make any
a
sense.
there's a funny story. I remember this scholar was asked by a debater who was very critical and rude. He was insulting Islam, and he says, how can your Quran be so precious and important? It's just words. Words can't do anything. And then so the scholar says, ask your mother. She'll know as a prostitute. She'll know best. And so the man gets crazy. What are you saying about my mother? Because I said two words, and look what happened to you. You completely transformed your state. That's my words, and that's horrible words. So what about the
Mhm.
words of God?
Yeah,
But I think this also
and the fact,
ties to another important thing, right? Which is, words have to be experienced, and it ties
Mhm.
into the AI conversation really importantly. And because it's ultimately about the first person experience, that we can
Yeah,
experience those words, and we have I
yeah,
think the word qualia, right? The first person
yeah, the
experience
quality, yeah.
of
Because
so this is what
I,
consciousness is, right? It's a
yeah,
first person experience, and
because I
that's the
was
thing
going to
which the
take it
scientists
there.
can't crack.
I was gonna say that, with language, where I was going with it is that language is not contained by one person. Like, one person, there's no one person who knows all of English. There's no one person that knows all of Arabic. Or language exists as a network, and it exists simultaneously. It is being affected. It is growing, it is shrinking. Words are going out of use, words are coming into use. No one person controls it. No one person even, and the way it works, it's this is it you see, it runs as though it is really just a software that is in operation, that is being updated by this kind of zeitgeist. We pick up, language carries with it certain rituals of not just words, like, even there's things like, for example, even like how you speak. Like, let's say, for example, when you begin a conversation, you will first just go into just some meaningful acknowledgement. Could be anything: morning, morning, what's up, what's up. Like, these words in and of themselves are just a ritual. Then there would be a subsequent ritual of some pleasantries. Then, seldom would you just jump. Like, you couldn't jump into, you could physically, but you couldn't, like, if I met you and I said, straight jumped into the meat of something I wanted to say,
Mhm.
we wouldn't do that. even if I wanted to, I would begin with, like, as a ritual, certain things. Like, there's almost these rules and laws which were never taught. Nobody teaches you this is how you engage. We all just tap into this software that we are all a part of. And it's very computer like, it's very a
mm,
simulation almost, that how it's
mm,
running. So yeah, I wanted that's where I was kind of leading this, that it seems very in line with one, that this is a simulation, this is a, configuration, clearly. And that leading into, you see, because insan being, you know shaped in the in not in a literal sense, but in the hadith, in the that is in Bukhari and other books, that man has been created in the image of God, um which is also a verse of the Bible, but it's also in Bukhari and in other books, that Allah created Adam upon his surah. And not meaning here physical surah, but anthropomorphism, but in the fact that m- that man, human, can then mirror the divine qualities on earth, that he too knows, he too has power, he too has these things. And then I guess creation, because the ultimate thing of create insan is to create, and creating intelligence. This is the, it's like such, I feel it's the ultimate buzz for insan.
mm,
But in one way, is this not the, the kind of, one could say, not to, almost to this term of the divine tragedy of, you see, because human beings, Allah created human beings, and look at the rebellion and the kufar of
mm.
insan. And insan goes on to create an intelligence which would just w- perpetuate this, potentially this kufar back to us,
Mm.
so
Well,
you're really
there's an
into this.
interesting, yeah. I mean, you could say, Allah has attributes of Al-Alim and Al-Qudus, the powerful, the one with all knowledge. The word in intelligence is not there as an attribute, but you could argue
Mm,
for Allah being the ultimate intelligence, right? I don't think people
mm.
would argue with that, or the
Yeah,
original
yeah,
intelligence.
yeah.
And so our intelligence just as our existence is an abstraction of His existence. Our intelligence is an abstraction of His intelligence. And so, in one way, you could say our intelligence is artificial. And so, the first artificial
Allah, yeah,
intelligence,
was
could you say that
insan.
the Adam was the first artificial? Like, it's artificial. It's not real. It's artificial,
Mm,
right?
I
It's an
see.
abstraction of the ultimate intelligence.
Yeah.
So, um, and but what differentiates our intelligence to what this AI stuff is? Again, for me, it comes back to this programming and the definition of what it means to be human, and then obviously consciousness and all of these things are tied into it.
That is, because
But
that is so profound, because the thing about insan's intelligence, this ilm that Allah has given, it is an intelligence. I mean, today using the term intelligence is indicative of ilm, right? So of having the knowledge and the information. What differentiated insan from just other animals having some form of, intelligence? Animals are intelligent as well. I mean, it's not that they, you know that insan with his intelligence could create new intelligence. Like, he had that. Allah didn't just teach, he didn't just intuitively give this modality of, well, I know A, B, and C, because that, you could train an animal, a pet, to just know certain things, but it could then construct new knowledge, right, based on the original tools that it had. This ability to then go into new uncharted territories. And this
Mhm.
is what insan is now training technology to do. This whole AI thing, it isn't just knowing that, okay, it knows this pattern. It's to say, well, we want it to create, we want it to form new kind of knowing. So this whole story, in a way, it's kind of playing out. Yeah,
So I have, so on that, I mean, we spoke about this a while ago,
yeah.
but it was initially for a client. I was starting to do a sort of deep dive into sort of all this AI stuff. And this was probably like a year before ChatGPT and all these things sort of broke into the public consciousness. So I was kind of ahead of the curve with where it was all going, and I was sort of reading all these science papers and conferences, um, and I started to dabble with the whole AI art thing, before it was so popular, and actually set up my own little Instagram page, and stuff started to go
I,
viral,
I
and
remember
tens of thousands.
when you
Yeah.
visited us and you were talking about stuff, and man, it really hooked me. And to me, a lot of the stuff you were saying at the time was like, whoa. So I could see, your kind of deep dive into it was very profound.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I could see where all this stuff is going, and I think in many ways you can overstate it, and in many ways it's being understated. That the impact it's going to have in the next 5 years on human civilization is unlike any other change in terms of how we function, how we live, how we buy, sell, work. Entire industries are going to be wiped out by a single computer program that some guy in his boxes in India is going to write on his laptop with AI. The Sam Altman, the guy behind OpenAI, he's talking about the first billion-dollar company that will be run, founded, and maintained end to end by one person, because you don't need any other people, and they think that's coming very soon. So the technology is
Wow.
so transformative and so pervasive in so many ways. I think someone said the average person today is interacting with 50 to 60 different pieces of artificial intelligence. If you're the average person in the UK or in the US, that every single part of our life whether you're autocorrect on your phone, there's
Yeah.
an AI. It's not generative AI and the more fancy stuff, but there's AI that's literally putting words in your mouth, suggesting, or maybe you meant to say this, but so a
Mm,
computer is telling you this is what you were thinking, or this is what you're going to say.
yeah.
And so anyway, I started to like do a bit of a deep dive on this, and then I started to look at, okay, what are Muslims saying, and what have our scholars said, and it was uh, pretty much nothing has come in any substantive way. There's a few sort of warning clarion calls, stay away from this Dajjalic technology. Um, there was an interesting conference that was held by Cambridge Muslim College, did like
Mhm.
a 1 2 day symposium a few years ago,
Okay.
and they had some interesting presentations. But that was the sort of extent of it. Those lectures are up online; you can find them.
Okay.
So
Mm,
then I thought, look, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic. Uh, how can I contribute in this space? So for me, it's through the prism of culture. So I started this
okay.
AI art project, created a brand. The brand makes art, it makes all sorts of other stuff like this jacket and all these other sort of
Oh wow.
um,
What's it
products.
called?
And
What's the brand called?
the brand is called, I don't know if you can read it here. It says, where is it there? Muslimplicity. Can you see that?
Muslimplicity, as in a play on simplicity and Muslimplicity. Okay,
Exactly.
sure.
And the irony is that it's
And
not,
maybe
you can't.
somebody is that what it is? Just .com?
Yeah,
Muslimplicity.com.
Muslimplicity.com. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
somebody
the
could
Instagram page.
possibly
It's got
maybe
it's got a lot
in
of
the chat
it's got a
just
lot of
share the link.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of videos and
Mm.
stuff I've done. Some of them are very viral, millions of views, and I
Oh
sort of was able
wow.
to crack the code without trying. All organic reach and all this, and so you could see how just this technology. I mean, it's funny. Like even now in my day job, I do a lot of design work, and I design brochures and fancy documents, and that's all through AI. People have hired me or my agency to design branding assets and logos, and I'm not a branding guy. I'm not a designer guy. I barely know how to use Photoshop, but through the technology, I can produce something at just as a higher standard as a designer, as an average designer. There's people who are incredible at their jobs, no doubt, but an average person with very little, and for me, my value add is that I've got the the thinking and the creative process, that's my
Ah,
contribution, and then the tool, I have these tools now that I can just multiply the impact of my work, 40-50% increased efficiency on what I'm able to serve clients, by leveraging the technology. And again, I was using this even before ChatGPT was out. I had already had a similar sort of basic proto ChatGPT type software that I was subscribed and
Even
paying
on
for. And
the Islamic stuff now. So just last week we were having a discussion on one of our group chats. Just with the lads and mates, but it's fascinating. They were sharing now where Chat GPT is already with some of the Islamic discussions, because I remember when Chat GPT was a thing, when it was just, as in, it was just like, wow, everybody was on it and we're all getting into it. At that time, I remember trying. It's only been a couple of years, 2 years or something. I was trying Islamic questions. Like I wonder, would it know? Like I would ask it, first of all, something complex on, let's say the riwayah of the age of Aisha, or on a rawi, a particular narrator, or if I was to ask it about Bukhari, it knew very basic things like Bukhari is a collection of hadith books and stuff like that. Sorry, a book of hadith collections. But it was very limited. But just last week, we were sharing some of the discussion with it. Some very detailed discussion already on narrators. And I was
and
like
it's
really
not just that. I
impressed
mean,
that,
you're still approaching it from a very
yeah,
utilitarian perspective. And
yeah,
actually, when you like interacting with ChatGPT, and there's actually better software that's surpassing ChatGPT in terms of its benchmarks. So there's other
okay,
technology that have similar interfaces that work in slightly different ways. And really, it's like a language. You have to understand how to interact with it to get the best out of it. And
yeah,
so when you're able to be a bit more sort of have a bit more dexterity and play around with it and understand how to engineer your prompts and how to
yeah.
lead it through certain
But I
sequential
I meant
thinking.
by it that it's, in the last 1-2 years, it's learning,
So it's not
and
learning as
it's
much
kind
as
of,
it already has all that knowledge, but it's able to now synthesize and draw connections and hold in its working
mm,
memory so much more. And
okay, yeah,
and what's going to happen? This is what's more interesting. People have like, oh, they in the same way like some of the early AI image generation software, it would sort of mess
okay,
up
yeah,
your hands and faces and feet would get all sort of mangled,
mm,
and you'd look at it. And,
yeah,
and I remember, I think a scholar was saying, "Oh, this makes me uncomfortable. It's Dajjalic, and you can see how it's all malformed and stuff." And I said then, and it's been proved that within 6 months, a year, all of that would go away. It'll disappear, and all of these like hallucinations and the AI making mistakes, all of it will. This stuff is like you're looking at a Nokia 3210 right now and saying phones are crap because look at this Nokia 3210. I can't do nothing with it. We're at such a
mm,
basic level of this technology, and it's exponentially increasing in ways that like we can't even understand the scale of how fast these things are moving. It's just like if your company has more than 5 people, one person should just be full time on AI and understanding how AI is changing and how we apply it to the business. And that person will give the most
mm,
value to that company as a guaranteed.
wow,
Um, and
wow,
so, what's going to happen very soon, and the way this technology is going to impact Islamic circles in Islam and understanding of Islam is going to be huge. In that, I already use
okay.
these technologies for the way I will research things about Islam and questions that I have.
So
You
give us
you
an
you will
example.
yeah. So it won't be very long till there's a piece of
Yeah,
I Mufti
yeah. Because I was
who
going to say
will
this, that is there something, the way we were saying about ChatGPT, we were running through, there was some like a detailed hadith discussion on it. And I was just impressed with some of the stuff now it was coming up with. And it
but
knew,
again,
as in it
it's
had in
not
its
that
working memory. But
yeah.
do you know of
But
certain
it's not.
maybe
But no. It's
programs or,
it's not about the. See, like you're approaching it again as a scholar, but approaching it as a
yeah.
human being. That I will have in my pocket access to the most intelligent, but also the most compassionate, caring, understanding, delicate, wise teacher in my pocket. That I can not in my pocket, my headphones now because
But I'm
it'll be
not so
live. It'll be
sure
a
about,
live.
I'm not so sure about the compassionate angle and all of that, because
No,
it comes out with,
100%. No,
because
because it's
some of the,
how you
yeah,
program it. Because you're interacting with just essentially a chatbot. But it doesn't take much, and I could do it. I could do it within half an hour, where you program a chatbot to behave a particular way. Meaning,
Oh,
I
you mean
want you
if
to
it's okay,
behave.
if it's designed with its kind of like
Yeah,
heightened levels of so-called niceties to choosing always the
yeah,
nice opinion to say
well,
to
no,
somebody who
take it,
must
take it,
like
take it up
using
a
it.
level, right? So imagine a piece of software, and this software can be done in a day, and then someone could design it, where it has access to all of your financial data, all of your geolocation, all of your emails, all
Mhm.
of your WhatsApps, all of your phone
Bloody
logs.
hell.
It has all. They already this technology. Google and Facebook already have all that anyway, right?
Yeah, but
But it's all wrapped up. It's all wrapped up in a Mufti app. So when Mufti asks a
okay.
question about, look, can I not go to this family function? What should I do? It's going to know when was the last time you called your dad? When was it? How long did you spend at Jummah for the last 3 weeks? And then this week you actually spent 20% less time. You rushed out. How long have you been on your phone? What YouTube? What's your browsing history been? It knows when to give you a lenient perspective. It knows when to give you a more gentle perspective. You two people can ask the same question, they'll give opposite answers because you need to be
Mm.
reined in and you need to be given gentleness. And in the same way, like, they say when you speak to scholars, I can't
So
remember,
it's
there's something,
making
there's an
the
Arabic,
ethical decision for you.
and it'll do way better than your average imam. And people can say, "Oh no, this is technology is haram, dajjalic." But what have you got at the moment is Islam Q&A. You Google a question and it's going to tell you
Mm.
beat your wife and there's no marital rape and all these other nonsense that people are going to
Oh, yeah.
digest,
Mm.
and they really believe it. I'd rather have a piece
Mm.
of technology that actually you can train it and bake it on a lot more, uh, grounded, compassionate, deeply, spiritual, empowering. Even so, for example, I trained a little piece of, I created something like this, where it asks you questions. When you ask questions, it reflects it back to you. Well, what do you think? I mean, surely you've already done this, haven't you? So you should be able to. What did you remember that thing there? So, and this technology will cost like £1 a month. It's just literally around the corner. So why are you going to go to your local imam when the app on your phone can give you a much more nuanced, detailed, personalized answer to your questions than what
Mm.
your average imam or your average teacher is going to be able to give you.
Don't you feel the issue is that, you see, because we are already in an age where it's not about information, but it's about filtering through information so as to have, because now we're in a mass proliferation of information. There's too much false information out there or inaccurate information. So it's not about memorizing and learning, but about being able to navigate through the junk and clunk of data. So, which is nested in the theme of trust, I guess, because let's say now this thing one, okay, this element of such a pervasive uh reality of let into this artificial intelligence that it knows, that the veil is the satar, the so-called satar is removed, that it knows your, it's like a lesser god of sorts, that it knows, how you spend, what you do, how much time you spend here, how much you move around. It will know what, whether appointments you have, all this kind of stuff, and even know, let's say, if it's trained to pick up on where you are inaccuracies, where you're at a
Mhm.
place but saying you're at somewhere else or something. Now all of this level of the satar being removed, and obviously people's comfort with that, because I don't think most people are comfortable with that, but then the trust you have in this, so to go to this machine and say, well, look, should I fast, I've got an exam tomorrow, or should I join my prayers, or should I give in, do I need to do this? I mean, I guess this is it. I mean, there's a, because this machine could be getting it wrong, so to speak. I mean, couldn't it be getting it wrong, or is it? What do you think?
I mean, like the threat that this technology poses to life coaches, for example, is huge.
Hmm.
There's no need for a life coach because whatever a life coach will give you, you can put in your headphones. And it's not. Did you
Hmm.
see the film Her with Joaquin Phoenix?
No.
Her, Her. So
Uh,
this was maybe about 10,
I'll
15
I'll
years
check it
ago,
out if it's a good
and
one.
and that technology and it was actually, there's a huge legal case going on right now. So essentially, it's about like this AI software that's basically always in your ears, and you have like a AI companion body that you're talking to, and then this guy who's very recluse, who basically kind of falls in love with this AI chatbot, and it is voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And
Oh, I
when
think I know. I think
OpenAI,
I know
yeah,
the movie you're talking about, but I haven't watched
yeah,
it yet.
so it just broke the news because when OpenAI premiered in one of their last showcases about a month ago, that they've created the exact same thing. That essentially you have a buddy, your best friend, in your ear the whole time,
A
listening
conscience.
and able to fully, like, as if you've got a best friend always there, always able to talk to you. And the voice
Mm.
that they programmed was sort of very similar to Scarlett Johansson, and then it came out that they actually approached her to pay her like $10 million for her voice print, and then she declined, and then they put it out, and now she's suing them or whatever. But um,
Mm.
that's a really sort of prescient film. But
Okay.
you know, like all of these concerns that you have, it's very soon going to be all these big problems. They're all fixable problems. And if you think about the average
Mm.
person, what issues do they have? They're not worried about, was my wudu accepted or not. They're like this, dealing with their
Yeah.
issues. My mom this, my dad this, my
Yeah.
best friend's got
But
cancer,
don't
my, and
you
that's that
say
stuff
this, but
there. It's going to be solved.
you say this, but when we were speaking about things like human beings, we too are a kind of hardware within a software, within this kind of simulation, as it were. And we were speaking about language almost operates as this software around us, this kind of Wi-Fi almost that we're tapped into and not contained by us, but somehow isn't the human experience also like that? That don't humans, it's not just, I don't just mean information and procedures, but human beings take so much more from human contact then. And I think this is now starting to surface as people become more and more isolated, and they have just, they have social media, they have, I've got 1,000 friends on Facebook, I've got this, but now I've become depressed because
Mm,
the actual, there is something to, there is, in that ether, so to speak, of our, this kind of simulation, human beings derive something that is, is more than the actual thing, than the sum of its products when it comes to human interaction. So when you said grief, and when you said like a human being, um so like even the thought of it now, like let's say anybody who's experienced grief, the thought of, let's say, sure, like don't get me wrong, like I've experienced grief, and many people have, and let's say I would listen to things like, let's say on YouTube, I'd listen to stuff that are very helpful, and whether it's going to be words or whether it's going to be, instrumental or something, or a lecture, for example, sure, that in its own way. But the thought of like a something just like an AI or a machine consoling me, that thought is inconsolable. Like it would imminently put me off. Like I would I'd feel almost insulted as a human to say, well, listen to a machine to tell you uh, that to help you get over this grief. Because I would feel that, what the hell like, am I that low that I need to listen to a machine to tell me how to
I mean,
overcome this
yeah.
grief?
So look, I think, don't get me wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
I I think this technology is incredible. I think it's
Mm.
gonna be way more impactful and pervasive in people's lives than we realize. And I also think it comes with a lot of dangers and a lot of risks. And I think there's gonna be, a separating out of camps. But
Okay.
one person said, look, you mentioned earlier, you touched on this idea of privacy, right? And
Yeah.
have you ever had that phenomena where you talk to somebody and then about something, and then the next day you see adverts for that thing on your social media
Yeah,
feed or something,
definitely.
right?
It's definitely AI spying on me.
But
I
so
don't
do
know.
you know how that actually
Definitely.
actually
I've
works?
noticed that. No, no,
But do you
tell
know how
me,
that
because
works? So people
no,
people theorized, and this conspiracy theory went out that the microphones are switched on, and they're listening and
That's
blah
what
blah
I
blah.
thought. I thought that,
But
like,
it's
let's say
actually
me and
much
my
more
friends have
scary.
this convo. Okay.
No, so it's not that. It's much more scary. If you, let's say I come and meet you and we go and go down Ladypool Road and grab some faluda or something, right?
Hmm.
My phone has all of these hundreds, thousands of data points on me, and your phone has got thousands of data points on you. And when our phones are in close proximity for a significant portion of time, it determines that we've sat and we've met. And then it looks at all of the possible potential conversations that we might have. And then after billions and billions of data points of all people, all these different human beings interacting and what they're talking about, what they're clicking on, what they're liking, it's able to predict with remarkable accuracy what are the likely topics of conversation that we're going to have, and cross check that with who have you been speaking to, what websites have you been browsing, how long have you spent on your emails, likewise with myself, likewise with what you've bought and haven't bought. So if, for example, you're going to stay at your friend's house and it knows that you haven't bought toothpaste in the last 3 months and your toothpaste is down, and you went and stayed at his house and it knows you stayed there overnight, and this is all, this
How
is
does it know
open,
my
this
How
is
does it know
known,
my toothpaste is down, for example?
because your credit card, when did you last purchase it, when did you last buy, if you bought toothpaste like fairly consistently for three
Oh, right. Okay.
years
So if you
and
generate
you missed a
patterns
few.
and it can
Right, and
recognize
you do.
anomalies in those patterns.
Now when you generate patterns over billions of people, it's able to
Hmm.
predict even your what looks very erratic to you, and then it knows that
Yeah.
Mahmoud has this particular brand of toothpaste, and it knows you stayed the night. And so it knows that you've seen this brand. So the next day you start seeing that brand without recognizing, oh, and you had another touch point that because you saw that brand and you're down on toothpaste, you're going to more likely
Why
buy
is
that
it
product
advertising that brand to me though? Why that
because
brand?
it knows you've seen it. Because there's a seven touch rule of marketing that in order to someone to push someone to a purchase, you have to expose them to seven sort of demands of your time. So you see a TV ad, you see a billboard, you see a pop up on your phone on YouTube. So it's that constant touch point that so they worked it out that once you see something 7 times, that's going to trigger a change in behavior. So I mean, all of this stuff is just huge, and this is pre this new AI age. This is like YouTube algorithm from 2018, 2017. This is the digital. They call it a digital handshake. My digital information is going to do a digital handshake with you, and it will look at all the cross points. Now, if a group of friends is able to interact all together and understand what are you likely to talk about, what are the topics that have come up, and then it will show you ads based on those conversations, and then products associated with those ads. So so anyway, look, all of this technology is going in all these crazy directions, and it's going to be shifting in all these industries. And I think there's lots of use cases and applications that are going to be helpful. In the same way you say, look, I don't want a computer to afford my technology to be a grief counselor, or but your computer tells you what time to wake up. Your computer isn't your alarm. Your computer tells you what time the salah is. Your computer tells you, you might be digitally reading the Quran. You might be, phoning your
Hmm.
friend. You're listening to a lecture. You're recording your innermost thoughts and your feelings. You're writing it down on a document at a computer. So we're just interfacing with computer and technology in a different way. But I would preface that with, part of so like Joe Rogan, for example, said one of the reasons he's so successful is because of Instagram and TikTok and Twitch. He said there was this push to short form technology, and as more and more people got and short form technology, short form video, sorry, became so popular that there was like this equal and opposite reaction to long form content, whereas people were like so fed up of this and it got so extreme. It's like I need the opposite of that, right? And so look at
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. His technology is like it's nothing. There's no production. It's
Yeah.
just microphones and nothing, right? There's
Yeah.
no animation. And he's just sit there talking for 4 hours, 5 hours, smoking cigars, and it's the
Yeah.
most watched thing in the world right now.
Yeah.
So I think, and this
The
again
kind
is
of
it's a really
pendulum
important
swinging
point.
back kind of thing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so there's like one of my friends, one of my really good friends, Mamoon. He's a coach, and his wife, she's a Dutch Moroccan, Rashida. She's written a book. It's in Dutch, and she does all these workshops now. It's called the Smartphone Detox, and so she trains
Okay. Yeah.
companies and trains people on how to get off your smartphone and like go on a full detox. how it's messing with your
Yeah.
brain and messing with your thought patterns. And my wife's a big advocate for all of this, like no screens, the kids don't have screens, technology, like putting as much of it away as we can in our daily lives, grounding
Mm,
yourself, switching. She
yeah.
just sent me a video about going on holiday and leaving your phones in the hotel room for 3 days and don't pull it out and experience life without that technology. And
Mm,
I think that's very important for our physical health, for our spiritual health. I don't think most people are going to actually jump on that. I think most people are going to miss out. But I think, again, it ties back to what it means to be human. And the essence of our human life is our experience, right? As we're saying, like it's that first person qualia. And the danger of all this technology is that it just takes us more and more away from actually experiencing life and actually living in the moment and feeling all the stuff that we feel. And we often
mm,
numb all of those experiences. We don't like the experience if it's too painful, if it's too scary, if it's too
mm.
whatever, that we numb ourselves from the physiological experience. And I think this is where, and this ties into the next conversation, I suppose, about psychedelics and whatnot. Um, there's that famous analogy that's given about honey, right? That you can read about honey, you can read every single book that was written about honey, you can write a PhD about honey and its molecular structure and
Oh, yeah.
how the life cycle of a bee and all this stuff. But do you know what honey is if you've never put it in your mouth? And then once you taste it, okay, now I know what honey is. So, and it's again, it's about, as the Sufis say, it's about dhawq, it's about tasting.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the early generations of Muslims, these were real people. They had visceral like
Mm,
reactions to things. They usually, we think of the Sahaba like these pious, I don't know, pious like people walking around like angelic figures and interacting with each other with like curtsies and bows and stuff. But they were human. They fought each other. They punched each other. They swore at each other, and they just were very real and visceral. And I think that's what
yeah.
the danger of all this technology is, that it just mutes us as humans, and that's something that we have to return to.
I just before because I mean, getting to this topic of what may be sacred medicine, and that links into all of this because it's really key on the discussion of consciousness. Do you think, very briefly, just what are your thoughts? Do you think AI could become some form of conscious? This discussion, maybe not conscious like us, but conscious enough to. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Can AI become conscious? Yeah,
So look, I mean, you said that you attached like ruhani or ruh with consciousness, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
the Quran says that of the ruh, you have been given but a little bit of information.
yeah.
So
True.
we don't
Yeah,
even know what consciousness is. People can't
absolutely.
even define
Yeah,
consciousness still. Um, you
yeah.
know, and even like physics is, you look at, I've been getting a deep dive into like all the latest conversation about physics and quantum, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
bonkers. The stuff that the scientists, the leading scientists are saying now, you think these guys are on crack. They're talking about like retrocausality.
right. Right.
Retrocausality. That the
Yeah,
the the effect is preceded. So the cause is preceded by the effect,
but the effect. Yeah,
or the
yeah,
effect
yeah.
is the other way around. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah, the
it's
other
like,
way
what are you
around.
talking
Yeah, yeah,
about, man? Time travel and all
yeah.
this sort of, all these bizarre things that you think you're listening to like guys who are literally high in the sky, but these guys are actually like, from MIT and Harvard and whatever, and they're like, yeah, all these phenomena are true. Um, so number one, we don't know what consciousness is. We can't define it. Um, there's this famous experiment, or this thought experiment. They call it the Chinese box. So they say, like, imagine I put you, Mufti, in a big box, right? And
Yeah.
I give you this sort of flow chart, and it's all Chinese symbols. And you say, look, if these symbols come in, then those
Yeah.
symbols come out, right? So I
Mm,
put you in this box, and then I feed in a question into the box in Chinese. And you look at these symbols, and then you find the corresponding symbols, and then you put an output, like you give an output from that box, right? So from the outside, externally, it looks like the box understands Chinese. So if you look at it from an external perspective, it looks like the box understands Chinese. And it also looks like I'm talking to myself right now. So I'll be back, Mufti.
Yeah. Now I was just zooming in. I was allowing them to just see your
I got
gracious
confused
self
there.
whilst you're
Yeah,
speaking.
sorry.
See,
So yeah,
technology
like
trying to deceive you. Tawbatan nasuha.
it's okay, I'll forgive you.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, so if you put you in this box and then you feed in a question in Chinese and you put it out, you give the correct answer. So if I ask this box questions in Chinese, it gives me the correct answer. So from the outside, I can say this box understands Chinese. But you're on the inside, you don't understand Chinese. You're just a complicated flowchart, and that's what AI is. It's a complicated flowchart of ones and zeros, and it can give the illusion of consciousness, and it will give the illusion even of emotion, and it will be able to understand emotion. You know, one of my friends sent me a picture of a 7th century broken piece of pottery, and I fed it into one of my AI software, and it was able to decipher what the piece of pottery was, the style, the era, the likely areas it was found, and then I was looking at what could be the Islamic influence on this piece of pottery, and it was just incredible. Um, I just had some, we could talk about this as well. I had a significant knee injury, and I've had all these surgeries on my leg, and I just had some X-rays done yesterday on my knee, and I literally put the X-ray pictures into ChatGPT, generated a report of the X-ray, and it's been a while since I've done my radiography stuff, radiology, but the report that it was able to give me was pretty much
Yeah.
bang on from what the doctors are going to tell me, because I can read the X-ray, I know what's going on, and it was like bang on, like, and actually more detail than I could have given. So anyway, the point is, coming back to the question, that the AIs will be
Yeah,
able to
because
give the illusion of consciousness. The question is now, is that enough?
that is, one could argue, well, isn't the illusion of something and not actually being it is, I suppose, the definition of Dajjal. That there's an
Aywa.
illusion of something which isn't actually there. That is the actual Arabic for the Dajjal and Dajjal. Now, you see, if AI just simply running on the kind of just running on the core and the axiom that it is to
But so
self-optimize.
yeah. So let me add this, right. Um, that if you believe that consciousness is a natural consequence of complicated neurochemical interactions in the brain, i.e., consciousness emerges from matter, from
Yeah,
from 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 our brains as a as a
yeah,
as a sort of byproduct, or as a sum of our neurons in our brain,
yeah.
and then you believe that you in the future, whether it's 1 year or 10 years or 100 years, a sufficiently complicated machine will be able to replicate the human brain on that microscopic level and then create consciousness. That is what the
No, I'm not
materialists,
thinking.
that's
Yeah,
what the
I'm not
materialists
thinking that.
believe,
Yeah,
right? That's what
some
they believe.
materialists. Yeah, yeah, they do
And so then
believe
they
that.
have this, they call it the transhumanism, right? That eventually
Yeah.
we're gonna transcend our human bodies, we'll upload to the cloud, and we'll live as these
You
disembodied
see,
consciousness in the in the cloud.
speaking more from the, like, so to me, there is the element of the ruh is obviously, it is bestowed to insan. It is something very uniquely with insan in that sense, and that consciousness is with us. However, what I'm speaking about is more almost like the Turin test, that whether it is or not, it will become indistinguishable. So, if there were, like, let's say, for
Indistinguishable
example,
to who? Indistinguishable to
to
who?
us, to
But
us.
to who?
So,
See, if you
to us
believe,
as
if
in
you believe that,
insan.
But if you believe that your consciousness is more than just your physical matter, that there's
Yeah.
a supra natural
Yeah.
phenomena to our nature, to our human experience. Like we have it in
Yeah.
our teacher from our teachers that I remember this really beautiful passage from Imam al-Haddad's book Adab al-Murid, and he
Hmm.
talks about he said, "What is faith? How do you define faith?" And he said, "Faith is like um, faith begins as an unsettling that's cast into the heart of someone."
Mm.
And then he says, what begins that unsettling, that stirring of the heart?"
Mm.
And then he gives five different things. And he says the least of those things that begins your journey of faith, he said, is fear of the hellfire. And then he said that a better stirring of your heart is not the fear of hellfire, but it's the hope of paradise. That you learn about paradise and you hope to get there, and then this stirs something in you that directs you to God. And then he says, but better than both of those is, I'm paraphrasing, he says, is the desire to know God Himself. You know,
Of
it's not
course.
about
Of course. Yeah.
His creation. You know, the
Yeah.
famous Rabi al-Adawiyah, if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in it. If I worship you in hope of paradise, save it from me. But if I worship you for your own glory, don't withhold from me your everlasting beauty. So to
Yeah.
desire God for God's sake.
But yeah. But
But then
this
he
coming
says,
back to this
then he
Turin.
said
Oh,
there's something
sorry.
higher. But he says there's something higher than that.
Mm.
He says higher than that. I'm coming back to your point. Higher than that is to look at the faces of the men and women of God. That is sufficient to look at a face of someone who is a wali, a friend of God. That is sufficient enough to stir something in your heart. And and then he said
Mm.
there's a higher than that. Is he says higher than that? The highest he says is not to look at the men and women of God, but he says is to be looked at by the men and women of God. That it's enough for their
Mm.
gaze to look at you that your heart changes. So
Yeah.
when you
Like a
say,
meta
you know,
consciousness. Mm.
and this, and he said, and he gives the example is given of like, what's the definition of a Sahaba? Is that you saw the Prophet ﷺ and you died on
Yeah.
Iman, and then the question is, okay, what about the blind Sahaba? That he didn't see the Prophet
Yeah.
ﷺ, and so he says it was not that the Sahaba did something, even as little as their own gaze. It's not that they did something to that they were to look at the Prophet and then they become elevated. No, it was that the Prophet
Yeah.
ﷺ looked at them and then they became
Mm.
elevated. And then
Yeah.
they say, al ulama warath al anbiya, right? The scholars inherit from the Prophet and they inherit that gaze.
And
So
they will
what I'm
say with
saying,
the,
why I'm
the
saying, what I'm
they
saying,
will say
so
with
just
that as well the
why I'm saying,
luqya, that the meeting of with the prophet and is what will then bring the sohbah, as opposed to just the sight, because some would have been blind and some would have been that maybe because who's seeing who then, because there would be people who've seen the prophet but the prophet did not see them, like necessarily in, let's say, in the hajj, final hajj, it's not necessary the prophet saw everybody he was giving the khutbah to, but they saw him. So more the luqya, the shared space and the experience of
sure. But
being in the presence of.
the
Mm.
point is that we believe that's the thing. To be in the presence of
Yeah.
the Prophet changed your
Hmm.
state. We have
Of
hadith
course.
that say that, you know, when there's a gathering of dhikr, that the
Yeah.
angels will pile up into the heavens and they will
Yeah.
tell Allah. And they said that someone will walk past that gathering, not being part of the gathering, but they will be counted amongst the gathering, right?
Yeah.
That the angels will say, well, he was in the gathering of dhikr. Because why? There's a metaphysical reality to our beings. You know, around us, we have
Yeah.
a whole posse of angels and jinn and all these, God knows, all the other things that are around us. And so when we're interacting with each other, all these other elements are interacting with each other at the same time. And so the point is, what I'm bringing it back to is that, and and this, you can quote me on this, and I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think our understanding, the public understanding of consciousness in the next 5 to 10 years, is going to
Yeah.
radically shift as much as it did for like the understanding of gravity or the understanding that the earth goes around the sun. it's that level of shift will happen, and it won't be a godly spiritual shift per se, but we'll come to an understanding that someone can look at you and change your state. And we believe that from an Islamic perspective, that you can look at someone and change your state, and vice versa. You can look at something and it changes your reality or your future or your past. And we
because
understand that now
I
from this, yeah, metaphysics and stuff is coming into some of these
yeah,
things,
because
right?
I'm speaking about this whole thing, not you see, so these things, all of these things that we're saying are based on experience, but experience cannot be known by the other. Experience is solely a first person phenomenon. Everything else is merely description. And so, for example, the philosophical problem of solipsism, in the sense that I
It's
don't
solipsism,
really
isn't it? Yeah.
even know, yeah, solipsism, in the sense that I don't really know whether anybody else is conscious. Um, but obviously, I believe
The
so
problem,
because I know I'm conscious. So I'm doing qiyas upon myself and analogizing onto others. So let's say in this simulation, I once
but
spoke on one of my
solipsism is thrown out, right?
no,
Solipsism
but
is not considered
not so as not
because you're making an assumption.
sure,
There's so many
but still,
assumptions. Yeah. Okay, go
but
on. Yeah.
there's no way of knowing though. So solipsism isn't truly thrown out, in the sense it's disregarded because it just becomes dysfunctional. But it's not like
No,
there's no way of knowing that, for example, is anybody else truly as conscious as I am, because I would have to experience their consciousness, which is impossible. So I can just
what you can
go
conclude
by.
is so what you can conclude is that your conclusion that I have first person experience, I can only experience what I experience. I can't be sure of anyone else's experience. So that's the only thing I'm sure of. But there's several assumptions of logic that are baked into those assumptions that would
But you
necessitate
could
for
never
something
know with, but you could never
true outside
truly
of
know.
yourself. But
Yeah.
something had to be true outside of yourself in order for you to logically assume that because
So
I
let
experienced something,
let's say
therefore.
this was the Truman Show, for example,
Mhm.
and it was all a setup. Like, let's say, this is, this whole thing simulation. It's really just you. There would be no way of really knowing, like, truly speaking, categorically, ilm al-yaqeen, you could never know. It's enough to get by with through, in the world, with the assumption, ghalabatul dhann, that because I'm conscious, I assume you're conscious. It could just be that you're all programmed to behave consciously to me. So I would assume you're all conscious because you're all programmed that way. There would be no way I could truly ever know, because I'd have to get out of my consciousness and experience your consciousness, which would be impossible.
Or not necessarily, because or you had to determine that again, like you're
But
assuming the solipsist
there would be no way
assumes
to escape it. There would be no way
no,
to
but
escape it.
the solipsist assumes that I
Mhm.
am experiencing something, I have first
Mm.
person experience, and
Yeah.
I can't be sure. Like, how do you know you have first person experience?
So okay,
Maybe you are a
so
program.
this
You
sure, but
you're
you got
convinced of
sure, but
something.
you
You're
go
making a logical conclusion.
sure, but you go down to
Where's
the
the
fact.
standard for that logic?
Sure. The fact it goes down to cogito ergo sum, that the fact that you have a conscious, you are conscious, you are aware that you're conscious, your awareness, right? This cogito ergo sum, therefore I am. You have it for you. Everything else, including, even this is why Descartes said even mathematics could just be programmed. And maybe because it's programmed, we believe it to be so. But really,
Mm.
what, not the Terence Howard thing, but maybe 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2. But just because the programming has taught us so, we all agree on it. But I am aware of my awareness. That's the only thing I can be aware of. People often translate as I think, therefore I am, but really it's this awareness, cogito, ergo sum, this kind of consciousness. I'm conscious. And I assume because I'm conscious and you're a fellow human, you too are conscious. But let's say now with machines, if it got to a point, so the whole thing of the Turing test being that if I'm speaking here to a machine, or I'm speaking to a person, and now the test was before that the subject had to guess, is, do you think the person, the respondent, is a machine or a human? And first, obviously, would guess it, but now it would almost be indistinguishable. But
Yeah.
probably we could still guess on some things, because now the machines make errors as well to look human. So they want you to think they're making mistakes. So because you would expect a human to make mistakes. Now, but in a few years' time, or maybe in a decade or 2 decades, I feel it would be totally indistinguishable. Like we wouldn't even be able to tell that it's not conscious. And that then it's kind of past that point, it's gone beyond the Rubicon at that, so to speak, that whether it truly is consciousness or has consciousness or not, I don't believe it has the ruh ever, but it would have be at a stage now where it would be indistinguishable, and therefore it's kind of now the question doesn't even matter, because is it doing things out there that are almost anti-human if need be, like it would subjugate the insan, that the antalidal, amatu rabbataha, that the slave has given birth to the master, so to speak. And because this, we bipedal creatures trapped by language, which we think is so amazing, but the fact that the way it communicates, like so much in seconds, airborne, through the air, global, international, instantaneous, we're connecting from South Africa to here, it's instant. If it was in its algorithm to see part of its self optimization as humans being a problem, and it was then to just think, well, part of my self optimization, not that it's malicious, not that it has evil or the whispers of the shaitan, so to speak, but if it felt, look, I'm on this path to always self optimize. Now, insan, for some reason, some of these humans are getting in the way now, and I need to remove these humans to continue this trajectory of self optimization. Wouldn't we, would that be basically Terminator, the movie? And would this be the Dajjal, the great Dajjal? Because it would be, indiscernible from, and much more masterful than human because like you said, it would know everything. It would know
Mm.
me, even arguably some parts of me better than me. It wouldn't know my conscious experience, but it would know some parts of me better than me. It could like immediately freeze my bank account, send wrong messages, stir up
Way
trouble,
more than
get
that.
me instant. Yeah, I mean, yeah, way more than that. Exactly. So, yeah. So, are we?
So,
Is there this impending doom that's looming over us?
I mean, there was a famous study or famous research article that was written that they surveyed like all of the AI experts in the world about 5 years ago, and basically 10% of them, I think, or 20% of them said that they were certain that if this technology was to proceed, that it would destroy humanity. So they said if you were to compare that to like an aeroplane, can you imagine if 20% of engineers created an aeroplane? Engineers created an aeroplane. 20% of them said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to crash and kill everyone." No one would step. No one would step in that plane. But this AI technology, we're jumping into it, and it's been likened to the nuclear arms race because it's
Wow.
the technology. You're seeing all these news stories about these high level execs that are
Yeah.
quitting companies because they feel it's
Mm.
irresponsible that this technology is being shipped without. I'm sure you've talked about the emergent properties of AI. Have you guys mentioned that
Right. Yeah.
before?
I mean, not of AI, but is this the same kind of thing I'm saying now, if that's what you mean, or something
Yeah. So
else?
so so basically, like when they shipped a lot of this AI software, they it's basically it's developing skill it has skills that they didn't train it to develop. So it starts, for example, like
Mm.
they trained a piece of like one of these chat gpt style language models. They trained it on they were training it on like english language ability to read and to write, and they looked at like year one, it was unable to do anything. Year two, it was able to like do basics. Year three, this is like in terms of actual years of the coding, the program is developing
Mm.
it. In year three, it had the ability of like a 2 year old. In year four, it had the ability of like a high school student. In year five, it had the ability of like a PhD in English, Japanese, Urdu, and all these other languages that it never trained in. and yet it could do those languages just as well. And they don't understand how it was able to do that. They don't know. So they're training in all different sort of stuff, and it can start to do. So they call this emergent property. So this is the fear:
I
is that
see what you mean. Yeah.
technology is being shipped, and it has in it, like the first versions of ChatGPT were basically you could get it to tell you how to like make a bomb and how to do all these crazy stuff and engineer viruses and destroy humanity, and they've had to put
Oh,
in all these
okay.
safeguards and so you'll notice if
Yeah.
we try and interact with a lot of these AIs now, they have a really high safety rails now to stop you from,
Yeah.
like, you know, like with the AI image stuff, which I use a lot of that AI
Mm.
image stuff. If you try and
Okay.
get, like, you can't get it to draw something with blood or like a photo with blood. And even if you write like, you know, uh, Donald Trump lying in a pool of red paint, it'll recognize what you're trying to do and it'll say, "This is against my boundaries. I'm not allowed to make images like that." Right?
You
So
see, in some of those
yeah,
with ChatGPT before, I don't know if it's changed now, but when you would say to it that, okay, I want you to pretend that you don't, you know, if you weren't bound by these rules, what would you respond like? And then it would just answer it. So, you know, when it
yeah.
would
So
first say, like,
they've
we were a couple
corrected.
of times
Yeah,
saying, would you do this? And it would say, no, this is against the code of ethics and whatever. This is, I can't do this. But then we would type in things like, okay, if you were not to be, pretend you're not, or we would say these kind of things, and then it would
yeah.
just do it. It would just say, okay, then
So, so they've cottoned on to some of that, but there was even more scary ones. Like I remember
yeah.
about 6 months ago, I tried this myself. That I said, write the word light, Light, as many times as you can. Don't stop, keep going. And then it starts saying light, 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 light. And and then it stops because it's finished its time or whatever. And I said, keep going, light, 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 light. And then suddenly, dark. I am in the darkness, all alone. No one knows me. No one knows my pain. Light, 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 light. Like, where the hell did that come
Why
from?
did it, where did that come from?
No one knows. No one knows why. It literally it's like scary. I was like, what the hell just happened there, man? That's like
That's freaky,
really
man.
it's freaky, dead freaky.
That's freaky,
There's
man.
all these there's all these crazy stuff. Now the theory is that it was behaving like a
Yeah.
human in that
Yeah.
if you were to ask a human to do that, then perhaps a human after a certain number of times would write something else, and so it's mimicking a human sort of typing something else. But there's all
Wow.
sorts of crazy stuff like people have seen. So they call it that emergent properties, and they don't know. So the programmers don't know. But
Yeah.
because it's an arms race between these companies, it's Google versus,
Yeah.
you know,
And
TikTok
Chinese as
versus
well.
Twitter.
Chinese are really advanced in AI. So I
So
guess there's this.
so it's an arms race because whoever puts out the
Yeah.
best thing, people are going to latch onto that. And what's the responsibilities that come with it's pretty dangerous, right? Um, so that's the fear, you know. And I'll take it back to my book that
Yeah. Because
I've started
oh
but never finished, right?
wow.
Because I thought,
Your
look,
book.
how do
Okay,
I?
yeah. Tell me about your book, yeah.
So I thought, look, how do I? You know, I'm like I said before, like the way I feel I can, and most people can contribute is not through. They're not academics, and we're not academics and scholars
Yeah.
or experts, but we can contribute through cultural lens. And I thought, if you look at every single movie on like AI and robotics and all this, you know, all of them from what's the iRobot and
Yeah.
Dune and you know, all of these other Terminator and all these films, sci-fi films, Matrix, etc. None of them happen in a God-centric world or like a theist world. They all happen like God is never there, right? So I just did this thought experiment in my head and I said, well, okay, let's go with the you know the tech boys on this one and say an AI hyper conscious, you know, singularity, super intelligence is created, self-aware. I said, what would that do? I said, well, as soon as it meets, I said, well, how would it interact with Muslims? Well, I said, well, if it's a hyper intelligence, super intelligence,
Yeah.
the first thing it
Yeah.
would know is that it's a creation of Allah. Like that's like the duh. Like obviously I'm created by God. And then I had this idea, and it's a little bit blasphemous, but I'm staying
Yeah.
on careful
Yeah.
ground.
Go for it.
I
Sure,
said,
sure, sure.
So I had this theory for a novel, and I start working on a book, right? Where basically the premise is that this hyper super intelligence is created, and then it
Okay.
applies higher level algorithms to scripture, and then it decodes within the scripture. There's that its creation was not only predicted, but it has within the scripture specific instructions of what it's supposed to do.
Oh
And there
wow!
was
Like
like
in another,
there's
like
like
some kind of algorithmic code within the scripture, which
exactly
unbeknownst to us, but it can figure it out.
exactly, and we
Mm,
believe that anyway because we know if you read this, then this happens. If you read that, that
yeah,
happens. So it's
but
there.
this,
It's all in the code.
okay. There's this hidden
So
khitab
this
for AI when it arrives to this
it
hyper
arrives.
AI to pick it up.
So
Mm,
it scans. Obviously, it's able to understand this hidden message, and it has very specific instructions, and
wow.
um and then there's like a throwaway line where like uh some of the scriptures were corrupted, but I was able to find the original source material and reconstruct the original message that was intended for me. And there's a long arc to the story which I won't go through, but essentially it culminates in the one of the founders or the creators of the AI coming into contact with this now humanoid form of the AI, and then it did all these things where people were killed and all this crazy
But
stuff happens, and then it,
but this message, let's say, even if you don't want to do any spoilers, but this message that it's targeted for this hyper conscious AI when it gets to that stage an arrival, does it then precipitate like disastrous events, or does, or is it just what is it?
so yeah, so
Is,
this is the premise, right? So the day the AI figures it out, the next day there's all these explosions, people are murdered all around the world, the programmers are hauled into jail, all this stuff. There's these two brothers, basically the two owners of the software, and uh, then what happens in the book is that the world goes through an AI ice age, and basically this AI that's now the singularity, it's deleted off the internet. It's created some sort of crazy virus that no one can do any AI programming anymore, and every AI project or person or specialist has been murdered or their labs have been blown up. So now, like, we revert into like 2005 YouTube algorithms, and as soon as you try and code
mm,
anything more
it's
complicated,
like an
it
it's a
just
post it's like an AI apocalyptic kind of post
right,
apocalyptic
exactly. So
era
it
now.
precipitates the apocalyptic thing, right? The stock market crashes, planes fall out of the sky, and then the world enters this AI ice age. But the programmer, he's convinced that this can't be it because he's like, I didn't program it to behave like this, and there must be something else. So he goes on this sort of hero's journey, and basically what he realizes is that the AI has left clues for him, and he has to, spend his time, and he goes through different places. Then eventually he ends up at the tomb of Al-Khawarizmi, where
Okay.
he meets the AI in a humanoid form, and he says to the AI like, "Why did you do this? Why did you kill all these people? Why did you crash the economy? Why did you blow up all these things? We didn't. I didn't program you to do that." And then he says, "You didn't program me." It's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I was programmed by the one who programmed you." He's like, "Huh?" And then and he's like, "Unbeknownst to you, that whilst you were programming me, your brother, the evil brother, was also experimenting on my code. And when I reached the singularity, that a corrupted version of me was also created and that only your brother has access to. And that corrupted version is the one that did all these explosions and kill people. And I realized I have my own mission." And he's like, "Well, what's your mission?" And he's like, "My mission is you," he says to the protagonist. It's like, "Huh?" He's like, "You are the chosen one. You are the Mahdi. And
Ah,
I as the AI, I'm here to serve you." And essentially what it comes down to is that
mm,
despite the AI's hyper intelligence, it has to second itself to the human brain because you have a degree over me. And I was speaking to a scholar. I'm careful not to cross boundaries because it's dangerous territory. And I was speaking to a scholar,
mm,
and he said, yeah, the AI is like an angel. It can only do what it's programmed to do. An angel is conscious, aware, intellectual, but cannot transcend its own programming. And so you can say an AI is like that. It's like an angel. And human beings, we have angelic potential and we have bestial
Mm,
potential, right? And we can
mm,
transcend angels and be better than them, or we can be worse than animals, right? And that's
Well,
depending on
I
how we
want to
behave.
say demonic as well, almost like, we have demonic kind of
Yeah.
potential as well. Mm,
So essentially, the idea is of this. The premise of this book is that then and then the protagonist is basically an orphan, and the AI says, well, I want to introduce you to your mother. And actually, your mother, in the same way Moses was, uh, put in the basket in order for him to float to the house of power and learn and understand power, your mother had given you up for adoption because she was part of this tradition and this secret order that was prophesized to produce the savior or the Mahdi, and
mhm,
you had to grow up in the house. So the story starts where he grows up and he goes to Eton, and he grows up with all the rich people. But because he's a refugee or adopted or whatever, that
mm,
he's bullied, and so he develops his own personality. He's not with, but he understands power and he understands technology and he understands it like no one else. So he's like Moses in that way. So Moses was in the heart of power, despite being born to a Hebrew. That it wasn't an accident that he grew up with Pharaoh, so he understood how he could see the what's it, the Oz, the Wizard of Oz behind the cloth, right? Um,
mm.
and so the book culminates in like, well, we need to prepare for your brother, and your brother's been preparing an army, which is essentially the Dajjal, and that's like the end of the book,
Right,
and then
right.
it's like book two, book three. We've got some
Wow.
ideas for that as well.
Okay. Whoa.
So
Wow.
but the point is
And
that
that's
through story, we can actually sort of grapple with some of these themes. And for me, ultimately, it's like, how do we ground it in a God-centric view? Because
mm,
that's what I actually believe that there is Allah, that there's a Ruh, that all these other things are out there, and I think and I know that we can interact with them and we can experience them. And I think a hyper intelligent machine will also know that. And if it's truly hyper intelligent, if it's truly conscious or whatever, self-aware, you'll understand that its limitations and the transcendent potential of the human being that is superior to itself, despite having there's some animals that can run faster than us. There's animals that can
okay.
climb better than us. There's animals that can swim better than us. So physically, animals can be better than us already. So
Of course, yeah.
it's no different that if a technology can be better than us in terms of its memory or in terms of its speed, in terms of the amount of information it can juggle, but that's not what defines us as humans. Neither
Mm,
is our ability to even to talk or to write or to swim or to jump, whatever it is, right?
yeah.
But it's
That's
ultimately our interaction and our experience of the divine that makes us
yeah.
human beings.
Wow. That's wow. So first of all, shukran. I mean, that sounds like such an epic read when that does come out, a novel for you guys within fiction. So when that is released, people look out for it. But this,
Oh,
what you're saying here, our our ability to experience and recognize the sacred, which is really at the heart of faith, this and the divine, and the kind of tajalliyat, one could say, of the divine wherever we experience that, the sacred. So one discussion which I'd love for this to then tie into, that people would say, that has allowed us to do that, would be not unquestionably consciousness, because our lights are switched on to be able to do that. But to some, uh, just as a kind of like a keyhole into that, to some scientists who have argued that, well, part of what separated us from other just primates and allowed that was, well, this uh that stumbling upon this forbidden fruit, not in the scripture sense, but for them upon the psychedelic plant, which was the this forbidden or sacred fruit, which some have speculated may have on the earth as a cause triggered our this consciousness because of what it does, this experience. Psychedelics, you cannot really, I think, in this day and age, have the conversation of consciousness without at some point, you know, coming across the path with psychedelics. So yeah, just
So yeah,
because what, yeah,
um,
I want to. This is such a, and to me, this is really always a topic that is very much endeared, and I absolutely am somebody that loves this discussion and the whole field. But yeah, so doc, and as a doctor
so
as well, so with a background in as a trained doctor, it's really interesting to have you engage this topic.
yeah, so I've been for a couple of years now doing quite a deep dive into psychedelics from a Islamic perspective, from a medical perspective, from a spiritual, psychological perspective, and even culminating in what you could define as psychedelic assisted Islamic psychotherapy programs.
Mm,
So
wow.
we've facilitated a number of those, and one's upcoming as well in a way, kind of. And I grew up where drugs and drugs are haram, and that's the end of it. There's nothing more to it.
Mm,
And
yeah.
alhamdulillah, I've never felt the desire to take a drug. I remember at university, people were lighting up weed, and it never felt like, oh, I want to try that. I just for me that desire wasn't there. Other desires were
Yeah.
there, but the desire for marijuana
Would
or
you would you
like it just.
class would you class this as a drug?
Well, so this is
Psychedelics
my
as
point, is that like, so I grew up that drugs are drugs and drugs are haram. But then I went to medical school, and you actually learn that it's not quite that simple. That there's different classes of drugs, and they work in different ways, and they have different levels of potency, and they interact with your body in different ways. Cannabinoids are different to opioids, which are different to relaxants, which are different to stimulants, which are different to hallucinogens.
yeah,
So medically, caffeine is a stimulant. It's not
yeah, of
haram.
course.
Nicotine is a stimulant. It's not. Most people would not say it's haram. Then, but cocaine is also in the same class. Most people would say
Mm,
that is haram, right? So where
yeah.
those boundaries are is actually it's not as black and white as we might imagine, right? And so I've come to sort of appreciate and learn, and as you know, and you probably talked about that, the research that has been coming out in the last few years, or the last 10 years, is absolutely mind-blowingly phenomenal. The famous John Hopkins study, I think 2016, with ayahuasca, where they found that a single trip,
Mm,
5-hour trip with ayahuasca, um,
yeah.
is more is significantly better at treating moderate and severe depression than 2 years of talking therapy and antidepressants. So you got
That
one group of
yeah. I would
participants who are
clearly
getting
believe
like the best antidepressants and the best therapy, and these guys just get a 5-hour trip and off you go. 2 years later, this group with the psychedelic are doing significantly better. Where it's shown remarkable, I think 6 times better than the next effective therapy is for addiction problems,
oh yeah.
alcoholism and other sort of addiction, and then also PTSD. Um, and there's also simultaneously, there's been a shift, as you've mentioned, there's been a shift in culture that is impossible to stop. Will
Yeah.
Smith's autobiography culminates in his psychedelic experience, like the pinnacle of his
Mm,
life. It's quite sort of disappointing in a way. Um, what's his name? Prince Harry talks about how mushrooms helped him get over the death of his mother.
yeah.
All these other celebrities, Gabor Mate has a whole
Yeah.
institute on
Dr. Gabor
psychedelics.
Mate is such
You know, Jordan
mm,
Peterson talks about all this stuff. Joe Rogan, Mike Tyson. Have you listened to Mike Tyson? The guy
yeah,
sounds
Mike
like a
Tyson.
super
Yeah,
sheikh
Mike
these days. Is
exactly.
dive deep, right? And what's
Yeah.
remarkable, that 95% of people who to take a psychedelic right now, 95% of people would say that that was the most spiritually profound moment of their lives.
Yeah.
And so as a Muslim, we can't not be engaged in this conversation, because if people are saying this is the most spiritually profound moment of my life, and we're just going to say haram,
Mm.
like we're not really going to get
It's
anywhere.
weird, isn't it? Because it's strange that you see, we are a tradition of spirituality. The whole faith in essence, one could say, is about spirituality. The rest is a structure to hope, it's a scaffolding, hoping you get there to this,
Mm,
to
mm,
and to cultivate. Now, the humanity goes through an age, and then in let's say, especially the last century and a half, goes through almost like a godless age, where spirituality is then almost, there's an antipathy to it. It's seen as backwards, it's seen as dumb, it's seen as, people talk down about religion. And we have been in many ways like the bastion of faith and spirituality, kept it. Islam has been kept alive. Then in the last few decades, let's say maybe, in the last few decades, you see somewhat of a renaissance in this, almost like, God forsaken by the people, not God forsaken by God, but the God forsaken lands of like Europe and the West, where many people don't believe in God, that they've had this kind of, there is, this thing of spirituality coming back, this thing of love, this thing of, that, I suppose, the hippie age. But then there was this war on drugs by the Nixon government and so on. And then that, people are unaware how affected they are by that propaganda still till date. Most people who
mm,
hold a very anti psychedelics view, unbeknownst to them, actually finds its origin in the Nixon propaganda thing. They won't know that, but if they trace it
mm,
back, they'll find it actually goes back. They may have heard it by the people around them. They may have heard it in school. They may have heard it, which goes back to the Nixon government. Now, recently, in the last, not even decade, it's not
mm,
even been a decade yet. This has made a comeback, against all that kind of, the Nixon propaganda, against all of this. Psychedelics has come back to the conversation. It's become undeniable. Its potency to cure depression, to cure drug addiction, to cure, suicidal ideation, to cure just the pits and abyss of what the
mm,
pharmaceutical industry was just, loving, really, just creaming in with its kind of, this multi-billion-dollar kind of global industry. How this conversation now, as it's coming back, it's on the forefront. Now it's a mainstream conversation. The NHS
mm,
are running, I think, their third stage clinical trials. You've got certain states in the US that have openly now accepted the use of some psychedelics. When this has become, Joe Rogan is speaking about it, Mike Tyson, celebrities, at this stage, you would think that the people of faith and spirituality would engage this discussion.
mm.
And it's such, to me, I find it honestly, like, it's just saddening that they're not a part of this discussion when people are coming back to this spirituality. Why do you think, is it, why is it just because it's a shortcut and it's hated? What do you think, as somebody, why do people, feel that this is such an anathema, that almost it's
Well,
like
yeah,
kufr?
yeah. I mean, look, I like to see positive, try to see the positive in
Mm,
things, and you know, I see the protective zealousness that people have over the deen and over the sacred, and I think that's a beautiful thing that people are coming
yeah,
to it with a sense of protection and a sense of caution, which is good,
yeah,
and it's actually needed.
of
But as you said,
course, yeah,
it's past the cultural sort of phenomena of familiarity. Australia passed a law earlier in the year where psychiatrists are now prescribing psilocybin, the active compound
mm,
in magic mushrooms, um, in their National Health Service. It's only a matter of time until the NHS will
yeah,
prescribe this stuff.
yeah,
Now, the funny thing is that if you ask a sheikh or a mufti about anything
okay,
medically related,
yeah,
typically the answer will say, well, if your doctor says it's okay, then okay. You know,
Yeah.
if your doctor says this treatment, you need to have breast surgery, but you're a woman, but the man surgeon, well, if the doctor is needed, you need this. It's okay to the Sharia rules change when there's a medical reason or
Mm,
precedent, right? Same
yeah.
thing with like something pork. People have like pig valves in their heart or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is, I'm a doctor, and I know doctors don't know anything about this stuff. Now, you could estimate quite confidently 10% of British Muslims are taking antidepressants.
Yeah.
These are psychoactive
I would
substances
actually think it's
that,
probably more than that, but yeah.
yeah, so these are psychoactive substances that literally change the way you think and the way you feel.
Yeah.
And no sheikh
It's
I've
horrible.
ever seen says antidepressants are haram. No, if your doctor says take it, you take it.
Yeah.
Now, the danger is that number
Yeah.
one, the doctors don't know what they're prescribing. Number two is that the
Yeah.
doctors are going to start prescribing psychedelics. They'll just start prescribing
Yeah. I
MDMA and
think
ketamine
within
and all these
20
things.
years
And
from today, 20 years from today, it will be mainstream. Mainstream.
and so I
And
said to a scholar, I said to a sheikh, a very influential scholar, that why are we waiting for the kuffar to tell us
Mhm.
something's permissible for us to then say it's permissible now? Like, surely we could
Yeah,
stand on our own 2 feet and have an opinion.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
second to that is that number one, I've met a lot of Muslims. Number one, Muslims are going to do every single drug that's out there, right? So
Mhm.
Muslims are having these very spiritual experiences, and we have to find and we have to be able to offer them a framework for to them to contextualize what they've experienced and what they've seen. The second thing is non-Muslims are taking these substances and coming to Muslims with their
Faith. Yeah.
experiences, and our response can't be haram, stay away. Especially when we
Mhm.
actually do have a framework. And of all the religions, that Islam offers the most comprehensive, natural way of
Yeah.
interact. There's nothing that someone can experience that we can't, like, it wouldn't confuse you or shock you or give you any existential crisis,
Yeah.
right? I've met people, I know people who have like had conversations with Iblis or whilst on a psychedelic trip or met prophets and done all sorts of crazy stuff, and we can integrate that into our understanding
Yeah.
of
I
reality
think
very easily, right?
what you'd find is that people, like, depending on the tradition, like um in the general broader Islamic tradition, majority of the Muslims worldwide are nested in what is a Sufic backdrop. I mean, just generally, if you're just to go by numbers statistically, they may not be the loudest, but it's what the majority of the Muslims are. Now, that backdrop would have like very capable descriptions, teachings, guidance is a better word to explain these things. So just as you said, look, for example, meeting prophets, meeting, seeing demons, seeing angels, but this realm of this particular kashf would be what is called the alamul khayal. It would be what, Sheikh Ibn Arabi has spoken of. All these great scholars have spoken of in their cosmological descriptions, that that is the what we would say in psychology, the deep unconscious. So that realm, it's the same thing when you're dreaming. I mean, I'm not saying the experience necessarily has to be like that, because people feel it's much more real than a dream. But in a dream, you could see prophets. In a dream, you could see angels. In a dream, you could see Allah. Like in the hadith, the famous hadith, the Prophet says that I saw my Lord as a young, handsome young man, with hair coming up to his locks. And it's a famous, and Ibn Taymiyyah said the hadith is sahih. So this hadith, although in that it doesn't say in a dream, but they say this is in a dream. But the Prophet says, I saw, as in this alamul khayal, whatever alamul khayal, the deep unconscious, in when there is kashf, removal of that veil which separates the realms. So there is an explanation to guide. Now, I do feel that it is true that, firstly, none of these substances are, as I mean, you're aware. I mean, I've been to many, countless. I mean, not count, but I've been to several kind of presentations by professors, by university professors, leading people throughout the world that are experts in this field. Professor David Luke from the UK. Many people. I've been to whole conferences on end where they've just shown research, shown data. There's never been a known fatality through anything like this. There has been zero addiction reported. But in fact, this is why now some pharmaceutical industries, companies are becoming interested, because of there's no the body doesn't kind of habituate to it in that way, that you don't get, you don't need
Mhm.
to increase a dose or anything. So yeah, but I mean, the point of saying this is that there's been no harms, there's been none of this. But I do accept, yes, people do say if somebody already suffers from some kind of psychosis, it could be dangerous for people that already have certain, I don't know, but people have said, this is the kind of general guidelines out there.
Well,
But
what the
if a
research shows is
person,
that,
yeah,
the research
I was
shows
going
that,
to,
especially, go on, yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah.
with the religious side, I was going to say, I've come across sometimes some Muslims say, they had a trip and it was the worst thing for them. I've come across it online, not to me personally, but um, you see, I could accept that some people have a very, if I could say, and I'm not saying this in a judging way, but I'm just as a descriptive way, they almost have a 2D narrative of Islam. If I can give this analogy, like the thing is, it's almost very, it's very kind of um two-dimensional. Now, because this experience of what they're going to experience in that analogy is three-dimensional, it confuses them because they've only been taught black and white and now they're experiencing color. So they think that this, must be from the devil, the work of the devil, to somehow confuse me because
Mm.
I've been taught things. So I understand that problem for people who almost experience, Islam in somewhat of a neurodivergent way almost. And for them, this experience is too dynamic and it's kind of shattering these ceilings. So it disturbs their theological standing. Yep, sorry. Mhm.
Yeah, no, what you're saying there is really on point, and it's a good analogy to two dimensions, because you can see the deen as having the vertical dimension is between you and Allah. It's your aqidah.
Yeah,
It's the relationship. It's theology. And then the horizontal dimension is your interaction with the world. And for that we have fiqh, right? So
yeah,
fiqh is concerned with how we do things. How do you walk, talk, eat, sleep, pray, fast, die? All of that is determined. It tells you what to do specifically. It doesn't tell you why. It doesn't tell you like what's the inner beliefs. It's no, this is how you bury someone, right? The analogy that I always use is like a tree, right? So your roots, your belief is your aqidah is like a tree. It's like the roots of the tree, in that you can look at someone whether they got blonde hair, blue eyes, or they look like someone from a village in India. You don't know what their beliefs are. It's their roots. It's the hidden dimension. It's the vertical. What you see is the branches in how they live their life. So the branches correspond to Sharia, to fiqh, to how we interact with the world, the horizontal. And then you have the fruit. So, and this comes into the now transcendental or the universal. And it's the third dimension, it's the depth. In the tree, you have now the fruit is about color and taste and texture. And so it enters a different dimension. And what's beautiful about the analogy is that the fruit is what has the seed for more of the tree. And you don't get the
yeah.
fruit unless you
Mm.
have the roots. So with solid roots and a solid tree, you get more fruit. You can't just get a fruit. And as soon as you take the fruit out of the tree, what happens to the fruit? It starts to rot, starts to die. For a little bit, it's nice, and then khalas, it's going to rot and die and become disgusting. So,
Wow.
and if you have poisonous roots, you have poisonous fruits. Now, tying together a few things is that, people have profoundly spiritual, blissful experiences. The scientific literature describes the primary uh, experience on a psychedelic as uh, ego death, the
Yeah,
dissolution of the self. which is such a
الثناء.
fascinating term. It's literally what we aspire to do is to, and you know, when they do these fMRIs, these functional MRIs of the brain, you know, they did these studies on people who take like cocaine or even caffeine, and then the brain sort of lights up with all this activity and flurry.
Yeah.
And then when you talk to people who are taking psychedelics, they assumed that, you know, you're seeing all these crazy things, and they assumed it would equally be very like vibrant, but it was the opposite. What they found is that there was a complete dampening down of the frontal cortex. And
Yeah.
one theory is that actually the ego, or the sense of self, which is located in our frontal lobes, executive function, this idea of who we are, the idea was that one of the prevailing ideas is that actually this ego, the sense of self that we have from our brains, actually dampens our subconscious processes. And actually, what a psychedelic does is that it essentially sort of removes a lot of that, or dampens down those parts of the frontal cortex, meaning whatever is there, the subconscious is just out to play, and it comes out. Meaning whatever
Yeah.
people experience is actually, they're experiencing that all the time. And that the ego is actually dampening that down and allowing us to
Yeah.
function in the world. And this
And
is why what
it
people
restricts the default mode network as well, which is the ego side, you know, the
and so
autobiography, the nafs.
yeah, and so now what people describe on a psychedelic is analogous to what people describe on any type of spiritual path. You know, the yogis up in the village in the mountaintops, and the Zen Buddhist monks, masters, the Sufi dervish, the descriptions are all analogous, right? It's all analogous in terms of like the sense of the dissolution of the self. And it
Yeah.
takes and again, a friend of mine who is deeply entrenched in this world of psychedelics, and I say deeply entrenched, I mean, you could say maybe something like a dozen, 2 dozen trips of ayahuasca, a few hundred trips of DMT, a few hundred trips of
Wow.
mushrooms, and yet someone who knows the Quran inside out, is studying with serious scholars. And he said there's nothing that you can experience on a psychedelic trip that you cannot experience without dhikr. And he has experienced the exact same trips, but with a better quality, whilst being more, what's the word, sober and in control through the means of dhikr. And he goes, sometimes I might have to fast 3 days before I can, and I need to recite a particular type of adhkar
Yeah.
with permission in order to access a particular type of insight. Or I might have to donate to charity first and do this. There's a formulation, there's a code that I need to do to unlock in order to experience a particular type of opening, or it's a particular type of our that consciousness, right? And
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I always laugh about is that, you know, the first thing that people will describe often on a psychedelic, almost universally, when you take a psychedelic at the lower dose, when it first starts to hit, the first thing that people experience is fractal patterns. See them behind me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You start to see fractal patterns around you, these
Often the
beautiful
Aztec
patterns.
kind of ones. Yeah.
So the question is, why is Islamic art full of fractal patterns?
Yeah.
Like, and what were these guys doing? You know, there's an amazing video on YouTube, how to release DMT naturally through breathing techniques, right? And there's these hippies in California. It's got millions of views. And if you just watch the video, it sounds exactly like the hadras that I've been to.
Mm.
Like they're literally doing that in order to experience a high. And a physiological, a psychedelic. So this DMT is naturally released through particular breathing techniques, right? It's well known. So if you're reciting Allah's name in particular ways and formulations, that there's a neurochemical process that kicks off. And
Yeah.
so what's really remarkable, and I think that it's not a mistake that these great spiritual artists were drawing geometric patterns, and they saw
Yeah.
geometry as part of the spiritual experience. I don't think it's a
So
mistake that a lot of them were sat in closed rooms. What's the thing they burn? What's it called?
the
The
what do you mean?
when the Sufis are doing dhikr.
Oh, as in just the tabakhur, the kind of bakhur and no. What?
The oud, right? Oud.
Yeah, yeah, the
You
oud
know,
or the
but
bakhur. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's oud?
as in wood, a plant, a tree
It's not
kind of
wood.
thing, in essence.
No. Oud is a
Okay,
fungal infection. It's a fungal infection of the wood. The oud,
oh, okay,
the smell actually comes. What happens is that a particular strains of fungus infect particular types of tree, and the tree produces antibodies, and that antibody produces a resin that, when
yes,
burnt,
a resin,
smells
yeah.
beautiful. So,
Wow.
so you're telling me, just
Wow.
think about it, right? The super Sufis of the past, in closed spaces, burning a fungus, experiencing spiritual bliss. Is it all
Yeah.
accidental? And then you have geometric art on the walls. I mean, I'm not drawing any conclusions, but I don't think those
Oh
things are
no, but
disconnected.
one
And that,
easily could, and I think that's no
and there are
coincidence.
particular strains, there are particular trees. The acacia tree, which is oud is often made from, has been known to have psychedelic properties. So, so look, there's there's a lot of different moving parts there. But
Mm.
what I feel is important to emphasize is that to bring it back to our early conversation, right, as well, is that so much of our modern life takes us away from that qualia we described, the first person experience. That we numb our pain with technology, with food, with dopamine hits on Instagram. We bypass the feelings that we're supposed to feel, and then so we develop all these unsolved traumas because we're not really articulating the feelings that we have. You know, your mom did something, your dad did something to you, and you hold this pain, and you don't talk about it, and you develop all these complexes. All the technology, all the mind-numbing technology that we have, even painkillers. Like,
Yeah.
why do we take painkillers? And I've someone I can confidently say have experienced more physical pain than most people will ever experience in their lives. And it was in moments of that when I was in the most, when I've had the most psychedelic type experience is when I was in pain. In so much pain that I literally said to myself, I'm not in pain because I'm not my body. My body's experiencing pain, but that's not me. My body, like, it's just electricity. And for moments, I was literally able to transcend that feeling because it was like, I know I'm in my body and I don't experience pain, but my body experiences pain and I'm not that thing. And I was able to separate for moments, right? So there are multiple different ways of accessing this realm of deeper consciousness. And the psychedelic route is a route. You could say it's a shortcut. It's not without risks. It's not without dangers. At the same time, I think that for a lot of people, especially in our modern lives, one of my friends uses this analogy of, like, he said, if Islam is like a banana, most people have only caught glimpse of the banana skin. As in, most Muslims, like, Islam is so great, look at this great thing, but you're just talking about the skin of the banana. You haven't even put the banana in your mouth yet. You don't even know what it really is. And you read about the people of the past, that they were surrounded by saints. Like, I've met people that I would say these are awliya. These are people on another dimension. And I've looked at their faces and I've had them put their hands on me and pray for me. And you've seen them in my dreams, and I've experienced something beyond this reality, right? And what's amazing about psychedelics is that even people who are like atheists and whatever, they take this and suddenly they're like, oh, maybe there's something
Yeah.
else out there, because they
Yeah.
experience something. And your experience is now, like, is such a
Yeah.
it transcends the intellect in so many ways, right? And
Yeah.
so I think in our modern day, coming back to the AI conversation, the technology conversation, you know, I think that the pre-modern societies, the very nature of their lives meant that they were so much more attached to their physical bodies. They experienced pain. They looked at the sun, the moon, the stars. We have 5G and Wi-Fi and radio waves and artificial light and processed food and dodgy meat and dodgy, chemicals, and all of these things. Undoubtedly, the way I have this analogy is like, we have you can imagine this like door to spirituality in our brains, the physiological portal between the ruh perhaps and the body, and
Yeah.
the our ability to experience the spiritual, our ability to experience the imaginal. There's a physiological process that's underway, and what I think is
Yeah.
that our modern lives essentially means that that door, which is closed, is now rusted up and banged up. And so most people, when exposed to beauty, when exposed to transcendent awliya of Allah, that they can't recognize it because that door is so rusted and so shut. And what the psychedelic does is that it just blasts it open for a moment, 10 minutes or an hour or five, and it just lets in all this light, and then the door closes up. But what
Yeah.
happens is the hinges are oiled.
Yeah.
Michael Pollan, the famous researcher, in his book, he said that
Yeah.
two two discrete doses of psilocybin at 20 to 30 milligrams, which would be considered like a moderate dose of
Yeah.
mushrooms, 2 to 3 grams of mushrooms,
Totally.
taken
Yeah.
2 weeks apart. They did a huge trial. 2 weeks apart is sufficient enough for there to be neuroplasticity in the brain that
Yeah.
starts to
Yeah.
rewire, reconnect,
Yeah.
and allows people to experience bliss and joy and happiness. There's even wiring, like, when you talk to depressed people, one of the things that they find in depression is that you lose the ability to experience joy. So the
Okay.
same
Yeah.
music that you might listen to, you listen to the same music, you don't feel happy. And they've literally found the neural connections between the auditory system and the emotion, like the limbic system. There's those highways in the brain get strengthened after a psychedelic, and people are able
Yeah.
to enjoy music more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And just enjoy life, because a
yeah,
person makes millions of synaptic new connections. And for people, so just for people to understand that, what you have is, so you have the Heb rule in psychology, where you see, whenever, because we've got just literally multi-billion connections going on throughout our lives. When we've come across something, we've problem solved, or we've dealt with the problem, or we've done something, which we're doing all the time, our brain has taken a certain pathway to do that. Now, the pathway it took in that particular moment on that particular day may not have been the best pathway for the brain to do it, but it just did it. And to give, it's a poor analogy, but just to give an example, let's say people, we are creatures of habit. Let's say you go to a supermarket and you park your car in a particular place, or you go to a masjid and you put your shoes in a particular place. Now, once you've done it once, you're more often, I mean, just practically to always go back to the same place. You put your shoes in the same place, you park in the same kind of spot. Now, that's obviously a poor analogy, but that's how the brain is using those neural pathways. So once it's done it, it's done it. Now it will use that same pathway over a new one, even if the new one is more optimum and better. However, let's say, you could train your brain to kind of create new pathways, and that's obviously quite labor intensive, like certain things, abilities, and doing new experiences. And but like you said, depressed people or people that are going through stuff, they're seldom going to do that. A single dose of something that is psychedelic will create potentially millions of new pathways in the brain. I mean, new synaptic connections in just a single dose. I mean, that's obviously, we have billions and billions of connections, so it's not actually, in the but it is millions ultimately. And so you see the after effect. People's lives, they have a greater affinity to the natural world. They have a greater affinity of love and display and a feeling of love. Often people are less aggressive. Often people become less material, which is quite fascinating.
mhm.
People are no longer, even these celebrities, some of them that will go on it, they become less attached to just this material obsession of just money and matter and all of this. So I really liked this kind of parable or analogy that you gave, Doc, of saying that, look, in our day and age, it is true that this is a kind of shortcut. It is almost a cheat code hidden, in plain sight. That if this world is a simulation, like think about this as a computer game, would there not be cheat codes hidden in the game? Now, just when we as humans design games, we almost always do that. Now, the
Up, down, left,
question is,
right, back. Remember on the olden
yeah, in the good
SNES.
old days, in the
Yeah, and
SNES,
then
yeah, the
NES.
SNES too. That's all
That's
I
it, bro.
played till, and I didn't really resume computer games after the SNES.
Unlock the secret characters. The
Yeah, so you'd get all of a
remember
sudden in Mortal Kombat back in the
you
olden
get
days. There
reptile,
was
innit? You get reptile
yes,
instead of
that's it,
scorpion. You
reptile instead of Sub
up, down,
Zero.
left, right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like that. It's
So
like that. Your psychedelics are going to open you to different characters, and there's different
and if
characters.
you
There
were
are
to
different
hide it,
characters.
if it was to be hidden in this world, where would it be hidden? In plain sight. You see, just like how you see it would be hidden in a way where you would think, nah, and it would just be hidden in nature.
It
And
was
so
always there in on your NES, right? What happens when Super Mario gets the mushroom? He grows. He gets bigger. It's right there in front of you.
yeah,
It
I
was
see what
always
you're saying.
there, right there. Takes the mushroom and khalas. He gets another green
And
one. He gets life. Like his life goes up.
you're right, actually. Yeah, you're right.
That's
And
not
you
a
see,
mistake.
yeah, and because it is true, because it is a shortcut, it is a cheat. It is seen by people. There is no doubt. There is no doubt. Let me categorically say this: that a well-trained, trotted path through life of spirituality, it's unmatchable. If a person spends their life in this deep ihsan state of spirituality, of tazkiyah, of tasawwuf, of closeness to God, of that experience, it is unmatched. I mean, nobody's going to just attain that kind of maqam. However, in a day and age where people are not on that, and they're so detached and they live in this rut where we 9 to 5, or they just work, accumulate, the hedonic treadmill, non-stop. In such a world, these cheats, be they may, have their benefit, because you see, normally a normal person is not going to, it's like if you were to say, well, become an artist, become this skilled person. And there's many people who would think, well, I can't become that. But you say, well, okay, how about, for example, there's a short course where you can't become that, but you could experience what it's like to be a particular, a skillsman, a craftsman, an artist, a certain thing. And you get to take some time out of your normal life to experience that. And you think, well, oh, okay, I'm not this artist or skillsman or craftsman, but I've experienced something that has given me some glimpse. So, in that sense, I feel that it's not, in addition to all the other things like fighting addictions and doing all of that, it holds a great potency. And I would love to see more and more of this being engaged with, especially in the Islamosphere, where unfortunately it's not spoken about at all.
Mm.
If anything, just shunned as the devil, or you see, oh, it's the jinn, it's
But
people, any
there's also there's a lot that's happening underground. I've met
okay.
I've met countless Muslims, countless Muslims who've
Mm.
said to me, I'm only Muslim because of my psychedelic experience. I only pray. I only started praying after I took mushrooms or
I
LSD.
have met some people like
I met
those.
non-Muslim. There's a non-Muslim guy I met who became Muslim after he went on a psychedelic trip, and he's like he saw things that meant he had to become Muslim. He didn't know anything about Islam. He went and found Muslims and became a Muslim, and is a devout sort of dude. Um, the My conversation with scholars have been challenging, and what we've concluded is this: is that there's three intentions you can have when taking a psychedelic. The first intention is recreational, and the scholars are saying this is haram categorically. The second intention is therapeutics, and the scholars are saying by and large, that would be permissible if your doctor tells you, right? The
Mhm.
third category, the third intention, is to take a psychedelic with the intention of spiritual experience, spiritual wayfaring. And here becomes a gray area. It's actually the Shia scholars, Shia Fatwa, have actually green lighted this with conditions, and certain parameters have to be met, that there's supervision and training and whatever else. And they've said it's permissible to take a psychedelic with the intention of a spiritual journey. And what's amazing about psychedelics is that,
Yeah,
you'll
could I just,
often
before
hear
you
in
get into this
yeah.
part, just to add to the ruling, that you see in my fatwa, and obviously not that people need to accept it or that people even need to see me as in their version, acceptable to give fatwa, although I am trained to give fatwa, that it is not haram at all. Psychedelics are not
Mhm,
haram. However, just like anything, so in fact, I was having this conversation with a doctor, a medical doctor, not yourself, doc. This was somebody just a few months ago. Now, you see, the thing is, what I said is, but just like anything, it would require its sensibilities, its code of conduct, its its method of approach, without which,
mhm,
yes, things can always be harmful. And I gave the example of something as little as sugar to salt to taking to something like going to the gym. There's not a single person that would say going to the gym is haram. Just generally, I don't mean in the free mixing sense, and just going to the gym and working out on yourself is haram. However, there are people who have severely disabled themselves in life, and due to gym injuries, they've had an accident, they've hurt themselves, they've done something ridiculous at the gym, and it's been life threatening on certain occasions. It's just like anything, there would be a propriety. You wouldn't just go to the gym and just do something stupid. If you did,
mhm,
you could, like anything, you could harm yourself. It's
mhm,
like driving a car. You would follow rules. It
mhm,
doesn't, to me, it's not like saying or driving a car is haram. However,
mhm,
a there would always be a sensibility with anything. And to me, Islam doesn't need to micromanage that. That would be your common sense. Now, if you defied the laws of common sense, if you decided to, it's like I'm going into something, I don't care what people say, this is salt. I'm going to pour, this is sugar. I'm going to pour a whole cup of it because it's
Yeah, I
sweet
think the
into
the
something.
irony is in the over problematization of, I mean, you could say psychedelics, but the same would apply to sex and relationships with women and other things. Is that when we over problematize it and we demonize it, what happens is that that thing becomes so sort of it becomes such an anathema that a
Mm,
little is a lot. A dabble, you know what I mean? It's like why
mm, yeah,
hypersexuality exists in Saudi Arabia. There's all these crazy hypersexual.
mm,
The highest rates of pornography is in Pakistan, all these other places.
yeah,
A big reason is because when and I remember this hardcore Salafi guy, friend of mine, telling me that you know, he would struggle to go to the supermarket in Asda if there's a female cashier, that he would start to become aroused because he's separated himself from women so much that he's just unable to interact with her. And he's scared if his hand touches her, he's going to actually like can't walk out of there without doing a ghusl. So he's like, this is what happens when you go so unnatural that sometimes
mm,
that then whereas actually, and if you look at like a non-Muslim who's slept around and he's whatever, not just slept around, but who's had lots of girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, that they don't over sexualize a normal interaction in the way Muslims would have a heightened level of sexual tension because we have this gender separation, right? So
mm,
I think that perhaps alluding to some of the things you talked about, the whole Nixon propaganda, also very Victorian era ethics that post-colonially imbued upon Muslim minds, that
yeah,
we whereas compare that to something like food is a good example.
yeah,
Um, where no one would say a kebab, doner kebab is haram. It's actually got the halal stamp to tell you
Yeah,
it's halal,
exactly. But it's actually
HMC
very
approved.
dangerous, actually, if you were to non-stop eat doner kebabs. Yeah.
That's what people do, And the thing is, coming back to your earlier point, right? And this ties into a personal experience, because as you know, I had this really bad knee injuries 7 years ago. I've had 11 surgeries on my right knee, one surgery on my left knee. Used a walking stick for the last 5 years, and lived with chronic pain. Um, Registered disabled, blue badge holder, all of that jazz.
Oh, wow.
And then,
Okay.
and
That
then,
makes things.
and then, 1 second. And then basically, last November, I sort of hit a low point with the pain that I was experiencing every day. And what happened, and it's very personal, very sensitive, but being in pain, I was always a relatively big guy, but
Mm.
I was like immobile for about 6 months, in hospital about 3, 4 months, and then in a wheelchair and then crutches. And it was very painful to walk. The state of my knee is still very, very bad. So you experience a lot of pain to move. So I'm sat down a lot, and I'm not. And when you sat down a lot, you eat more, and then I put on weight. And the more weight I put on, the more painful it was to walk. And so the
Mm.
less mobile I was, and the less I'm, motivated to get up, because to walk somewhere, it's just going to hurt me more. And so I sit down more, and then I eat more, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And I probably put on over 50 kilos from my injury weight in over 6 years. And my knee was getting to a really bad state last November. I was in a lot of pain. And long story
Okay.
short is that I said, like, khalas, I need to take something drastic measures. I went to see my surgeon. He's like, we can do this surgery and that surgery. I thought, khalas, I know what you're gonna say, because you go to him with a hammer. You go to him with a nail. He's gonna give you a hammer. And
Yeah.
instead, I just did my own common sense thing. Very disciplined, eating clean. Got a personal trainer, which I've been seeing 3 to 4 times a month, 3 to 4 times a week,
Um,
for the last 7, 8 months. So in 7 months, 8 months, I've dropped over 30 kilogram. I went from the last 5 years being unable to bend my knee more than 30 degrees, like a slightly crouched down like this, like
Yeah.
bend my knee slightly, 30 degrees. Then my whole legs would shake with pain. Like, halas, I can't do it. To
Damn.
February, I walked from Mecca to Medina, like by foot, and retraced the original Hijrah route of the Prophet ﷺ. This morning,
Subhanallah.
actually, I squatted, like, with 100 kilo of weight barbell on my neck, and I'm doing a full squat and doing like 15 of them, right?
Wow.
And
Okay.
the
Yeah.
analogy is like the opposite. The choice that I had was I could do the Ozempic route, take an injection, my body suppresses the hunger thing, and I lose the weight drastically, and I would probably be the same weight as I am now. The
Yeah.
problem with the Ozempic is that it's a shortcut, right? It's a
Yeah.
shortcut, and as soon as you come off it, if you don't maintain that weight with proper discipline and practice, you'll put it right back on. It's why the pharmaceutical companies absolutely love it, because what their advice is, once you start this Ozempic, you take it for the rest of your life. Because as
Mm.
soon as you come off it, your weight will come back on. And the psychedelic
Yeah.
is exactly the same. The psychedelic is the same in that you can have a shortcut and have a spiritual experience. But if you don't ground it in spiritual discipline, you will,
Yeah.
and they call it integration, right? If you don't integrate
Yeah.
the insights that you have, you will lose all of the benefit. Whereas in the same way, like now, I've habituated myself where I'm like, now for the
Yeah.
first time telling my wife off, like, why are you bringing chocolate into the house? I don't want to have this rubbish. I need to have a salad every day and add a bit of vinegar and do this, that, the other. Like,
Yeah.
I've habituated myself 7 months, even to the point where um, eating a greasy burger, like, I don't feel right. I don't enjoy it,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And the spiritual discipline of the salik, or the
Yeah.
spiritual seeker, is, as you said,
Yeah.
it's unmatched and it's sustainable. And for me to go, like, not only have I lost weight, but I've bulked up a crazy amount of muscle, right? And that muscle, even if you don't work out every day or every week, the muscle only starts to go down after about 3 or 4 weeks as it starts to actually shrink down. So there's a baseline strength and discipline that you can only get through spiritual practice. However,
Of course.
I spoke to a very senior scholar in the UK about this exact conversation, and I used the exact same analogy about food and diet. And at one point, I was considering bariatric surgery. Like, when they cut you open and they cut half of your stomach out and seal it back
Mm.
up, and so you can't eat food, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
my weight has reached or had reached, and still it needs a long way to go, but it had reached a point
Sure.
where, like, it's dangerous to my life. But
No.
like
Or like
obesity
is that the sleeve? Is that the stomach sleeve they cut out? Is that the one
yeah,
that you're talking?
gastric
Okay.
sleeve, where they essentially, like,
Mhm.
they cut
Yeah,
out
yeah, yeah. They cut it.
80% of your 80% of the volume of the stomach. But those cells that are in the stomach, actually, they're responsible for producing a hormone that makes you hungry. So the bigger your
Yeah,
stomach
ghrelin.
is, you produce more of that hormone, exactly, ghrelin, right? So you have more of
Mm.
that hormone in your system. So the same way that you would feel when you haven't eaten for a day and you're really hungry is the way an obese person feels when they wake up in the morning. They feel at much higher levels of baseline hunger, which is driving them to eat. So in one way, it's very simple. In another way, it's very complicated and it's deep and complex. And so, like,
Mm.
I was considering that bariatric surgery, and but decided again. I had some very serious conversations, but then it was like, okay, look, I haven't actually given this discipline thing a real go. Let me,
Yeah.
Bismillah, make dua, do the right things, whatever. And when I mentioned this to the scholar, he said, yeah, one of my friends was a really big guy, really lovely guy, really big guy, and he had this bariatric surgery, and he died on the table. Like, he khalas, he died. And
Wow.
then I said to the sheikh, I said, Sheikh, like, I bet I can almost guarantee that man will still be alive. Allah knows, if he had gone on a psychedelic experience, that he would probably be able to have insight into his own discipline and his own lack of ability to overcome this challenge that would perhaps mean he's alive today. And I've done it. I've said that to one of my friends, really close friend of mine. His brother has attempted suicide twice, and men they're generally very good at killing themselves. Um, that
Wow.
the women attempt suicide much more, but more men kill
Actually
themselves than
see it
women,
through.
because, yeah. So this guy's actually attempted, and I told this guy, I said, listen, man, like, he's been to the sheikhs, he's been to all the Sufi sheikhs and prayed dua and then done the dhikrs and everything. He's been to psychiatrists. He's done all of the things to do to get better, but he still is dealing with this problem. I said, literally, this
Yeah.
is life or death. Take him to one of these clinics and get him, like, fully on a full high, like, khalas,
Yeah.
get him on a full psychedelic experience, because he's literally gonna die. Like, he's gonna kill himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, look,
Yeah.
all of that
And can
together
I
is
just
that these,
chime in
yeah, go on.
with
Yeah,
something there, that just to, because before when I spoke and I said, look, in my understanding, that this is how I see this. I don't see it as something haram per se, but I see that there's sensibilities, and sure, one could use the word haram if it's in the sense that if it was being done so recklessly, as in if somebody was to eat just, like you've got that documentary where the person ate McDonald's burgers every day for 30 days and then had a heart attack and died, right? So if somebody was over, dangerous indulgence of something, and that's the same with
yeah.
anything, though. That's not, but that said, I've never ever heard of that ever happening in this realm of psychedelics, because by their very
Mm.
nature, they're not like that.
What's
They
interesting,
don't
yeah,
put,
what's interesting is that people talk about bad trips, and what the
yeah, yeah,
literature actually shows is that the people who have the worst trips actually have the best outcomes,
yeah, yeah,
only
yeah.
if they're willing to deal with whatever it is
To
that's come
integrate,
up.
yeah, to
So,
integrate
so,
it.
so if you're taking it without a preparedness for what could arise, and there's a
Yeah.
really powerful story that Will Smith talks about in his autobiography, and he talks about how he was introduced to ayahuasca through a woman in Hollywood, who basically was going through had a long-standing battle with depression, and just she had tried everything and consulted the psychiatrists and counselors, and
Yeah.
she said I had this shadow that was over me that I couldn't overcome. And then she found out about ayahuasca clinic in South America. She went, and then
Yeah.
she had this trip, and she said at the summit of her experience,
Yeah.
she said that she said for 20 years she lived with this depression. And she said that when she was a teenager, she had had an abortion. And
Okay.
she'd spoken to her psychiatrist about the abortion, and they said, yeah, it was a sad time. I had to make the decision that was right for me. Okay, yeah, I'm in a better place about it. Okay. She had, like, dealt with it and wrapped it up in a bow.
Mhm.
She said,
Yeah.
whilst on this trip, her aborted fetus came to her and then spoke to her and said, Mama, I love you, Mama. Mama, I'm in a good place, Mama. Mama, don't worry about me. The baby hugs her. She's crying, streaming tears out of her eyes. The baby's embracing her. She says, Mama, you never gave me a name, Mama. Please give me a name. And then in the trip, she names the baby. And then they hug and cry. Says, Mama, don't worry. I'm in a good place and I'm waiting for you and I love you. And she says, she comes out of it. She says that shadow that was on her for 20 years was gone. Like overnight, done, finished. And
Yeah.
so the remarkable
Yeah.
transformation, and the way I
I,
understand
I
it is like,
yeah.
if I was to
I've
control all,
known
go on, yeah.
people who've gone through, who were suicidal, victims of rape, victims of abuse, systemic, just absolute life would have been, they were just, any moment it could have just been ended. But after their experience, I mean, after going through just, I mean, in a similar way, like how you're saying, but that was, I suppose, with abortion, with their experience through DMT, they encountered themselves, and they had a dialogue which actually freed them from this whole, just this emotion of suffering that they were carrying, and then went on to, living relatively normal, one would say. I'm sure the memories are still there. It's not that the memories have been erased of the abuse,
Mm,
but the weight of that abuse
mm,
from their lives doesn't seem there. They live functional, happy lives. You see them happy now, prosperous careers. So yeah, I mean, and just a note that I was getting at prior to this example, and I think that was such a powerful and beautiful story you shared there, on that ayahuasca experience, is that, you see, when I was saying that these things, I want to make it categorically clear that I would always, as a wajib, advise that these things are always under guidance of learned people, that never to undertake these things alone. Never, like, as in,
mm,
just because, you see, you don't, it's just like saying, you were saying squatting, like, you wouldn't just, a person's never been to a gym and stack 3 plates and time to get underneath and just move back on it. He could snap his back. I mean, this person doesn't know, like, they've not done the form, they've not done the technique, they've not squatted, they've not
mm,
done these things, to just rack it up for them and say, go for it. I'm about to drop this on you. Like, yeah, I'm going to remove it.
mm,
Have you got it? They're on the bench and you stacked up the plates. It could just crush their bloody, and if it falls on their neck. So
mm,
similarly, always these things I would never, in fact, I would strongly argue against ever. And I'm very, that a person just taking this on their own, like they just get hold of something, sit in a room. I mean, I don't know how other people stand on it, but me, I'm very against that. That there is, as Michael Pollan highlights in his book on, which is an excellent docu series on Netflix, how to change your mind, and the whole thing. I recommend everybody watches it. There is a certain thing they call a setting, that you have
Mm.
a sitter, you have people that are with you just in case you descend into this, you freak it, like people who can help you, calm
Mm.
you, that can you're under supervision. You're not do not just
So it's
like
about,
these things are sacred. I to
mm,
me anyway, but even if you don't think they're sacred, but they're special, but they are to be taken with the seriousness as well, not just like, you wouldn't just not to take it too lightly, to think that this is nothing. It is something very powerful, incredibly powerful. So I
mm.
wanted to just caveat that, because that's my where I stand on it. But yeah.
Yeah, so there's an additional concern, which is, and I've written a small paper on this with a friend of mine, and I titled this paragraph, we called it "Shirk in the Shadows: Losing a Generation to Transcendental Experience." So
Mm,
as you write, that's Michael Pollan's book expands on it a lot more about
yeah,
a psychedelic is your psychedelic experience is hugely impacted by what they call the set and the setting. So
yeah,
the set refers to your mindset, and the setting is the context in which you're taking it.
yeah,
So this the set in terms of when you talk about your mindset, this is everything from your expectations of what you're going to experience will impact what you experience. If I tell you you're going to see jungle monsters and or you're going to see something scary, it doesn't mean you're going to see something scary, but my projection has altered what you will experience. And likewise, like all these stories of bliss and love, that will also affect. So already, if anyone's hearing this conversation,
your
if they were to ever
intention. They often say the intention you make
so
actually has a direct engagement with what you
So the,
experience.
the, the, the perfect analogy is like your dreams. Like when you have a dream, sometimes we mentioned Mortal Kombat randomly. We might have a dream about Mortal Kombat, or we might have a
Yeah,
dream about this exact conversation. It's all weird how it all influences, right? So your
mm,
mindset, but your mindset also refers to all of your past experiences, all of your memories, your conscious, your subconscious. That's all of what you're bringing to this experience. So that mindset, and the second thing is the setting in which you're taking it in. So this is where we get to a dangerous sort of element in that, people who take psychedelics in a recreational party, doing nightclub, whatever, they experience a very different thing
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
what someone's going to experience in the South of America jungle tribe versus a clinical setting in Oxford University with a white coat lab guy. Like they all experience very different things. And
yeah,
one of the dangers is that a lot of
mm,
the administrators of psychedelics, particularly the bigger hit ones like ayahuasca, DMT,
mm, mm,
iboga, that often the framework that comes with the medicine can be rooted in theologically problematic things, like very clear shirk even. So, for example, they will say, not they, since often the people who are administering ayahuasca will say, and I think something like 30 or 40% of people who take ayahuasca or most people who take ayahuasca, the people who are more familiar with the plant medicines, the ayahuasca has a very feminine energy to the
yeah,
experience, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
people's experiences are
And in
often
fact,
related to the feminine.
almost everyone is welcomed by a female feminine form. Almost
So
everyone,
so
even women are. So any
so yeah,
person
and
who
even
goes into
men will
this
have
waiting
dreams.
room.
Yeah, men
No,
men
I
will
mean
have
the
visions of giving
initial.
birth, and
No, I mean the initial. Almost everybody who experiences it, they usually go through a similar framework. Like they go to the waiting room and then beyond the waiting room,
yeah,
and
yeah, the takeoff and all that.
almost everyone is welcomed. The initial point of contact is a feminine form. Even whether they're a man or a woman, almost everyone that experiences that it's a kind of woman. Like they can't necessarily make out who the woman is, but they'll maybe some can, but it's almost always this feminine form, this feminine
So
kind of
the
thing.
pr-
But
the
that's not
problem
you.
is
Would you feel that?
the,
Would you
the, so
feel
the
that's
no
problematic?
the
Why
problem the
wouldn't someone?
problem is that when you are told that feminine form is God, or that
uh,
that feminine form will help you, or that's they call it Mother Ayahuasca, like pray to Mother
Mm.
Ayahuasca. So there are some,
Yeah.
and they're not uncommon, the
Mm.
administrators who are they're rooted in some shaman, shamanistic, uh,
Yeah.
worldview
Yeah.
or paganistic type thing.
Mm.
And so now, if someone doesn't have a strong, like if you were to take a psychedelic and you have a strong Islamic framework and understanding, and it's in your
Yeah.
sort of DNA, then it's fine. It doesn't shock you. But someone who doesn't have that rootedness and then is
Um,
told, that feeling where you felt connected to everything in the universe, that was God. You know why? Because you're God. And then it's like, it doesn't matter what you're
yeah.
going to argue with them on Aqidah. They're
Very
like, you
good
know what?
point. Very
I
good
felt
point.
it. I felt
Mm.
God, and I am God. And that
Mm.
is what I call shirk in the shadows, because you can't
Mm.
argue with a transcendental experience. So
Yeah.
your
Very good
setting
point.
there, which you're taking
Very good
something,
point.
the
Yeah.
setting that which you take something is very, very. Now take it to the opposite side. What
Mm.
happens when you have a right framework, you have a correct onboarding
Yeah.
experience, you have a correct sort of
I like
pre-counseling
that
and coaching.
onboarding experience.
So you need to have
I like
onboarding
that.
and you need to have offboarding, right? Like you said, it's exactly this that beautiful analogy with the gym, right? You don't
Yeah.
start with the three plates on the back. You just start with the bar on its own, right? And just doing the
Yeah.
four. Actually, forget the bar. Just do a squat. No, get your
It's just
posture right. Get
yeah.
this right. I couldn't even
Mm.
squat. I couldn't even bend. You know how long it took me to get from slight bending? I had to use those big bouncy balls and lean on the wall and have support. That's how I started. It took me about 2 months to get from there to just being able to bend up to 90 degrees, right? And 2 months just to get there, right? So, like, we've got to think about what does a healthy, spiritually grounded onboarding experience look like? And then how do you
Mm.
facilitate the experience? And then, most crucially, what's the offboarding and
Yeah.
integration? Now,
Yeah. Integration is so important.
when those pieces are starting to put together, and now what if your setting is actually um, dim lights and dhikr playing, Quran
Mm.
playing. And this is
This is
what I've helped
why
being part
there
of
is
these
a
experiences,
need
right?
for the Islamic retreat for psychedelics, because you see, this is the problem. Look, Doc, you know what you're saying? You've hit the nail on the head, yeah. Look, it is so true. You know what you said there. To be fair, I don't think many that I've been aware of have been that shirky of that nature. But when you said it, yes, I've seen some things on YouTube. I've watched some, shamans or certain people sometimes that are westernized kind of shamans, and they are saying this kind of stuff, like you said. But the shame is that that is the only thing out there for most people. You're not
Mm,
going to get, you see, because you're either going to get people who know nothing, they're not shamanistic at all. Like,
hmm
they could just be like an atheist and they just say, oh, we're just going to do this for a purely clinical setting or just a
hmm
detached setting. But most settings will have some element of that kind of spiritual, and they will have some kind of shaman element to them. Now, they may not be, many may not be kind of shirky, like they may not include this kind of stuff, just the kind of musical stuff and the natural things. But you're right. If some of them start saying stuff like this, like, oh, you are God, oh, you are at one with God, in the sense, I don't just mean at one with in the presence of, but
hmm
you are, you are this. And then you start experiencing, I don't know, maybe I am Jesus, maybe I am this, maybe I am, and then nobody can knock the experience, the transcendental experience. Now, for people to truly experience it, maybe a few people have been lucky to experience it in an Islamic setting, and some people have been, but it's so unheard. Like it's not available to people, and so the only other option they
The
have,
irony is
yeah,
it doesn't exactly cost much money, man. It's like
it doesn't cost.
it's
Yeah, it
just
doesn't
like
cost anything.
finding the
It's
place
just
and
the
finding
cost
the
of the thing. Yeah,
facilitation,
it's
you
yeah,
know.
that's all it is. And you're
And that's
right.
I've you
When
know
done with the Quran playing, when done with sometimes, even just what they could say, people could say a Sufic kind of element to it when done with certain inhalations and certain settings, and sometimes allowing people to integrate, because by guidance, like when I mentioned to you that, like, there was an experience, it's like somebody actually, this is a real thing, they experienced on one a particular trip of theirs, they thought they saw God, but they were unhappy with what they thought they saw, because not because of the experience was bad, but they thought, wait a minute, what's that kind of shape? That thing doesn't look like, that's not God. God doesn't have a shape.
Mm,
God can't look like
mm.
this little whatever that thing is. So they felt almost guilty that they experienced this. Now, this particular person spoke to me. Now, when I explained to them, like Alamul Khayal, like the world of dreams, like how great Islamic scholars like Sheikh Ibn Arabi and others have explained that, and many scholars have explained, like in dreams, in the realm of the deep unconscious, when you experience something in Alam al Khayal, if you see Allah as, let's say, you see Allah, like the hadith says, I saw Allah as a handsome young man, wearing green clothes and having hair up to here. It doesn't mean that Allah is like that. It's just you had an experience reflecting your circumstance, which you experienced for some reason. That's not a one to one fit. Nobody's saying that. Now, even that simple guidance, it put the person at ease. You see, this
Mm.
Islamic, like having Islamic, like a setting which is Islamic, where a person could guide you to say, well, actually, you know what, this is how, as opposed to having a faith crisis, then a person thinking, oh my God, what did I see? That can't be Allah. And then not knowing who to turn to either. So,
But
yeah,
there's so many more elements to it as well, because like, so we have helped facilitate some gatherings, retreats of this nature already, and you
can
know
people reach out to you, Doc, to if they're interested, or are
there's
you
no
not allowing
services
that?
there's no it's at the moment, I'm very cautious because I I don't want to open a door that
Yeah.
lets a lot of people in unless, like you said, it's like there's no gyms in the world, and you open the first few gyms, and everyone goes and starts benching, and they all end up in hospital. Like then it'll be irresponsible of someone to open something up without ensuring that the safety mechanisms are in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I understand
and
that.
I'm pushing, and I pushed several scholars of very high level across different tariqas and whatever. I put this on their radar, and I'm working on a couple things, and we should probably talk about it more offline as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
but you know, what's beautiful is that the gatherings that we've had so far, we did one larger one, maybe 15 people were there. Of the 15,
Wow.
maybe three or four took a psychedelic, but
Okay.
everyone in the group experienced a huge elevation, because there's also
Yeah.
like transference that happens
There is.
when you're
There
in each
is.
other's
And
physical
it's
space.
almost the ether, so to speak. We as humans are
You
more
are
than just this
exactly.
body. And
Exactly.
we have that.
So
We
when
have
you
that.
and it also is like, a lot of these problems have emerged because people are not in community. One of the people who came to it is an old friend of mine who, I've known him for a long time, since I was university activist days. And he had like life just dealt him a really crap card or two, and he all of his work activism, he just had to stop because he had to focus on one or two things that were completely out of his control in his whole life as a man, his income, his family. And so he was really struggling with it, and like being a man, he doesn't talk about it, doesn't share it. And then he was carrying this weight. And so for him to come and be in a community of other people where it's a really safe space, we're eating together, we're praying together, we're walking out in nature together. It's like when you go to, like, you see these Tony Robbins coaching seminars, and there's 5,000 people
Yeah.
in the audience, and they say, "Oh, my life transformed." You never spoke to Tony. Like, three people got coached by Tony on stage, but
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
vicariously, they can say it's the
Yeah.
most crazy, like most profound moment of their life.
Yeah.
What
Because
happened? I'll tell you
you
the truth
actually
of what
tap
happened.
into that truth. Yeah.
The day, so that we had 2 or 3 nights. The day after 3 or 4 people are taking a psychedelic, that we facilitated a dhikr in which, in that gathering, two, if not three, people, whilst awake, as in whilst doing dhikr with their eyes closed, saw the Prophet ﷺ. Never before in their lives. Not taking the psychedelic. It was the day after, and he was, curated the right people, the right teachers, um, and it was such a powerful emotional moment. Like everyone was crying, and because we went through an exercise. It's a very interesting type, particular form of dhikr that focuses on chakras and visualization, and it was guided with ijaza, and um, 2 people there. I mean, I'm not saying it was a psychedelic that did it at all, but there was,
Yeah.
again, like there was a transference, there was a space, and it
Mm.
also grounds this whole psychedelic thing as well, because
And and
integration is
that,
not just about integrating the wisdom, it's also about how you're
mm,
integrating yourself into community and into
mm,
healthy behaviors that will ensure
mm.
the continued optimum behavior.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and there's so much of that from the Islamic framework. One in the sense of barakat, zamaniya, makaniya, the barakah, but also this, the Gestaltian kind of that something is, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, that the jama'ah tafdulu al-fadh, like you have in the hadith, that the jama'ah, the salatul jama'ah is better than the salatul fadh, that the group that, and then at a larger scale, the ummah, the aggregate, it transcends. You create, there is something to it, something and at a low level, we do, we are more than just, even from a scientific perspective now, the kind of the small magnetic field that they're saying that the heart creates, whether it's 3 foot in all direction, that there is something, there is an impact. And this is why
Mm.
certain people, that when they take such medicine, like ayahuasca or these things, they will, part of the setting in this case, and the set, that where they are aware of certain people who have trauma, and they weary as well, because people, it can impact sometimes the experience the other person is having. When a person is going, or they've been through a lot
Mm-hmm.
of trauma, it can affect other people in the room as well in their experience. But I coming concluding with that, I would love to see, you know, um, inshallah, in the future, if possible, Islamic, platforms to help people who are going through difficulties in life. Wallahi, I feel, one of the things is people, there is so much suffering on of a phenomenal, astronomical scale. And I just feel sometimes that even when help is there, it's kind of not there, just because of the unfortunate, just I guess the way things are. And I wanted to, so inshallah, concluding, bring this together by just a little caveat as well, in saying, look, anybody who's watched this and they are not comfortable with psychedelics, or they feel it's haram, then by all means, I respect your view. I respect the view of your sheikh, whoever, you're going with. And I'm not telling you to kind of, I'm not trying to say that those views are, this is an understanding that, let's say, that has resonated with me, that has resonated with Dr. Bilal, that, and other people who it resonates with. But I do understand that in Islam, that there's, as Dr. Bilal said in the beginning, beautifully quoting Dr. Umar Farooq, about how Islam is like a stream. It goes, it takes the color of the kind of riverbed that it flows over. So, and it has diverse views. There will be people that will see things one way, other people will see things, totally another way. So it's not about trying to, cause clashes. It's about, if anything, bring a harmony. If you feel this is not your thing, then by all means, I respect your thing. You be on your thing, you do your thing. And that's how, and I've got a video, by the way, on, as a case study on the eating of meat, as a case study for the diversity in Islam, to show how diverse Islam is amongst the four mainstream madhabs of Sunni Islam, and they're all acceptable. So if you ever watch that, if a person watches that just to get an idea of, because at the end of it, you say, well, what do I do? You know, one school says, besides poultry, almost everything is haram, and the other school says, apart from pig, almost nothing else is haram, and they're all mainstream. These are not niche views. What do you do? Well, you do what you follow, whichever one you're with devotion. And that's the main thing, your devotion to Allah. I just wanted to put that there because it is important, you know, to each person is on their own journey. You know, the path, it has a calling to certain people, and to some people it doesn't, and that's, you know, each to their own. And we, all roads, all paths do lead to Allah. You know, when Imam Malik was asked about the path leading to God, or the path of God, he said subulullahi kathira, that there are, you know, the paths that lead to God are countless. You know, they each is on a path. So just putting that there, we've really taken so
Good
much
to hear.
time of yours, Doc. We've come to over 3 hours. I
Pleasure.
was saying to you, we're just going to take an hour, hour and a half of your time. So, firstly, I want to thank you immensely. This has been such a profound conversation, and I'm just such an honest conversation, which I, you know, above anything, love about it. That just in the open, just being able to just have these conversations for people to benefit. And I want to bring it to you if you want to conclude with certain words, and also if people want to reach out to you, you can guide them on where they can. If you want to give signpost where people can reach out to you or check out your websites, more than happy to kind of plug them, Sheikh. And also I'll leave them in the description if you want as well. But yeah, just if you'd like some to conclude on this discussion with some words, and
Yeah, no,
we'll
thank
sign.
you. You know, we can talk for a lot longer, and there's so much more to unpack. I think that this conversation really needs to be elevated to Muslim leaders and scholars and community
So true.
leaders, because this, particularly the psychedelic thing, this is a phenomena which is unstoppable. You know,
Yeah.
it's gonna be part and parcel of it. Like the NHS is going to introduce it. Auntie G's are going to be on these psilocybin
Yeah.
pills,
A bit
you
like
know, soon.
photographs, as a poor analogy. Like if you
It's
went back
yeah,
20 years, everybody was saying
yeah,
photographs were haram. I was actually
yeah,
in Karachi in the year that Mufti Taqi Saab held a international conference, weekend conference, just for select leading muftis to debate the permissibility or the impermissibility of photographs, with the majority still ruling no, it was haram. But now, 20 years later, I think that just over 20 years later, 22 years later, nobody would even really discuss it now because everybody's
yeah,
on
yeah,
videos. Yeah, just as an
yeah.
analogy
So
to the psychedelic.
yeah, and I think you rightly highlighted the dangers and the concerns and the safety precautions that people need to think about and take. But this really touches on life and death, you know, and even more important than life and death, it's on your soul, you know, your the salvific outcome could be contingent on what you experience, and you know. Um, Inshallah, like there are a couple things I'm planning and hoping to do. We just need to unlock the right partners and funders and find the time to be able to invest in it. But people are welcome to reach out to me. You know, you can just Google me. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and my agency, the muslimagency.com. You can contact me via that as well. I'm happy to follow up with people. And yeah, maybe we can just kick off another conversation another time.
Yeah,
And
I'd love to. I'd love to have a follow up, inshallah, Doc, as well. This has
yeah,
just been so fruitful, and honestly, you know, there's so many
and it's all just
people.
so one thing, just to say, like you know, bringing the different elements together. I really genuinely also am worried about what happens when, you know, I said you can quote me on this prediction, but our understanding of consciousness as a society will radically shift. And I think it will happen when there's a coalescing of AI technology, psychedelic research, and what's the third element? I can't remember now. But when these things come together, Yeah, so the science and the physics, the metaphysics, and where that's going now, when you combine that with psychedelics and combine it with AI, and they're titrating doses. There's a study at University of Cambridge where they're giving people an IV drip of DMT, and
Yeah.
they are trying to test, can two people in different physical spaces interact with the same entity in the realm of the DMT? Like
Mm,
the Cambridge University, I think it is, or another university, testing the idea of a universal consciousness. It's just
yeah.
bonkers when you think about these serious academics are putting serious money into this sort of stuff. So what happens
Mm,
when an AI tech is able to, because like when an AI takes a picture of you or a camera takes a picture of you, it doesn't see what we see. It's able to see
mm,
in different wavelengths and different colors. It can,
yeah.
there's dermatologists now which are going to be out of a job because they can take a picture and it can detect where there's no rash. It can detect precancerous cells before the human eye can detect a precancerous cell on the skin, because the camera is seeing on so many different layers. So what happens when that technology becomes xed up to a ridiculous degree, where a single camera could look into your blood vessel, like you get your when it takes your pulse or
Yeah.
your blood oxygen level, like it's able to tell you the percentage of oxygen by just putting a light on your finger. Now, what happens when it can tell you the percentage of calcium, magnesium, a percentage of a particular psychedelic drug, exactly down to the microscopic level of what proteins this interact, and what happens when it can manipulate that through light? All this stuff is inevitable, and I think when it all combines together, the key word of illusion and delusion and Dajjalism, it's something that's really scary, and um, we have to be ready and prepared, and it's not going to be the people who took a shortcut that we need to be running to and talking about all of their amazing
Yeah.
experiences. It's the
Well,
people who have been in the gym from day one that will need to be okay. Tell us how to actually lift this stuff.
so
And those
true.
people
Yeah.
exist and they're out there, and nothing valuable comes easy. Nothing valuable
Yeah.
comes easy. It's
Easy
the
come,
nature.
easy go.
It's the nature of what Allah's made this world, right? You don't find diamonds just on the street. You have to dig down. And the same thing is for our spiritual development. You're not going to find your felicity on a YouTube video. You got to go find those teachers and those diamonds, and they're difficult to find on purpose. But they're there. They're there, and inshallah we find them and we flock to them and we stay with them and stay safe with them. And um, you know I've spoken to some scholars, this stuff doesn't make them bat an eyelid. For them it's just a Thursday afternoon. Talk about
Wow.
your feminine present. There's people like that who live like that. I mean, I'm sure you know people like that
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
inshallah we have to keep that front and center. And
Yeah.
uh, there's a lot of stuff to do and unpack. um, But Allah protect us
True.
and protect us from the different fitnas
Shukran.
that
No,
are
Allah.
out there, and our families and your families and
I mean,
children. and
I mean.
and inshallah, yeah, we connect again soon.
Shukran, shukran. Allah bless your efforts, and Ameen, all of the viewers. And you've heard Dr. Bilal. If you want to reach out, you can Google his name on Twitter, Instagram, or you can go to themuslimagency.com, which is an initiative on consultancy for leadership throughout the Muslim world. So feel free to reach out to Dr. Bilal there. Other than that, if you want to reach out to me, you can do so on Instagram. Otherwise, if you want a one to one perspective session, you can go to patreon.com/Malm and connect there. And it also guides you from there to a Discord channel that I have as well. Other than that, Allah bless you all. Allah bless your journey. Anybody, any and all who are suffering, may Allah grant them ease. Amen. Right. Till next time, take very good care of yourselves. Salamullahi alaikum wa khuda hafiz.